The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned toward the grand staircase where Victor Ashbourne, Duke of Ravensmoor, stood beside a woman who was not his wife. Evelyn watched from across the marble floor, champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. 3 years of perfect smiles, flawless curtsies, and silent endurance, and this was her reward. Public humiliation wrapped in silk and jewels. But Evelyn Harrow didn't break. She never did. Instead, she set down her glass, lifted her chin, and walked straight toward them. This is a story about a woman who refused to disappear. Stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wedding had been beautiful. Everyone said so. The flowers, white roses shipped from the south at obscene expense, had filled St. Margaret's Chapel until the air itself seemed to bloom. Evelyn's dress, ivory silk with Belgian lace that took 6 seamstresses 3 months to complete, had drawn gasps from the assembled aristocracy. The Duke himself had looked magnificent in his formal attire, tall and dark-haired, with those unsettling gray eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they touched. Beautiful. Perfect. Cold as a tomb. Evelyn remembered standing at the altar, her hand trembling slightly in Victor's, not from joy, but from the crushing weight of understanding. She was 22 years old, and her life as she'd imagined it was ending. The man beside her, 31 and carved from ambition and ice, had looked at her exactly 3 times during the ceremony. Each glance had been measuring, assessing, like she was a horse he'd purchased and was now inspecting for defects. Her father, Edward Harrow, had sold her. Oh, he hadn't put it that way. He'd used words like alliance and opportunity and securing your future. But Evelyn wasn't stupid. She'd seen the ledgers he thought he'd hidden, seen the creditors circling like vultures. The Harrow estate was drowning in debt, dragged under by her father's gambling and her late mother's medical bills. Victor Ashbourne needed a Duchess. Her father needed £30,000. The transaction had been neat, bloodless, efficient, just like the man himself. Your wool gathering, Evelyn blinked, pulled from her memories by the clipped voice of her husband. They were in the carriage now, 3 hours into the journey to Ravensmoor Hall, his ancestral estate in the north. Victor sat across from her, reading correspondence as if she weren't there. He hadn't touched her since they'd left London, hadn't spoken except to issue that single observation. I was thinking about the ceremony, she said quietly. It went well. No incidents. He didn't look up from his letter. Lady Pemberton seemed pleased. Her approval will be useful. Useful. Everything was useful or not useful in Victor's world, including apparently his wife. Evelyn studied him in the fading afternoon light. Objectively, he was handsome, sharp features, strong jaw, the kind of austere elegance that made artists want to paint him. But there was nothing warm in that face, nothing soft. It was like looking at a beautiful statue that had forgotten it was supposed to be human. Will we be entertaining at Ravensmoor? She asked, trying again. Eventually, once you've learned the household and understand what's expected. And what is expected? Now he did look up. Those gray eyes pinned her in place. Perfection, Lady Ashbourne. Nothing less. The title still felt foreign. Lady Ashbourne, Duchess of Ravensmoor. 3 weeks ago, she'd been Miss Harrow, reading novels in her father's crumbling library and dreaming of a marriage built on affection, maybe even love. Naive. Childish. This was the reality. A cold carriage, a colder husband, and a future that stretched ahead like winter with no promise of spring. Ravensmoor Hall announced itself at dusk. The estate sprawled across the landscape like something out of a Gothic novel, all dark stone and sharp angles, towers that pierced the gray sky like accusations. The grounds were immaculate but severe. Trimmed hedges in geometric precision, gravel paths that crunched with military exactness, not a single flower to soften the effect. Home, Victor said, and Evelyn couldn't tell if he was being sincere or ironic. The servants lined up to greet them. Evelyn counted 23 people standing in perfect formation outside the main entrance, their faces carefully neutral. An older woman in black stepped forward. Mrs. Halloway, the housekeeper, who had managed Ravensmoor for 27 years and looked like she could run a small country if necessary. Your Grace, my lady. Her curtsy was precise. her assessment of Evelyn swift and thorough. "Welcome to Ravensmore Hall." "Thank you, Mrs. Halloway." Evelyn kept her voice steady, her smile warm but not too familiar. First impressions with servants could make or break a household. "I look forward to learning from your expertise." Something flickered in the older woman's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. It was gone too quickly to tell. Victor was already walking inside, leaving Evelyn to follow. Mrs. Halloway fell into step beside her, reciting a litany of household information. 73 rooms, 14 fireplaces currently in use, a staff of 42 including grounds and stables, dinner served at 8 o'clock precisely. The interior matched the exterior, grand, expensive, and utterly devoid of warmth. Dark wood paneling, ancestral portraits with judging eyes, furniture that looked uncomfortable on purpose. Evelyn's footsteps echoed on marble floors that had probably never heard laughter. "Your apartments are in the East Wing," Mrs. Halloway said, leading her up a sweeping staircase. "His Grace's chambers are in the West Wing." Separate wings. Separate lives. The Duchess's apartments were beautiful in the same cold way everything else was beautiful here. A sitting room done in blues and silver, a bedroom with a canopy bed that could sleep 4, a dressing room larger than her childhood bedroom had been. Everything perfect, everything chosen by someone else. "Will there be anything else, my lady?" Evelyn turned to find Mrs. Halloway watching her with those sharp, calculating eyes. This was a test, she realized. Everything here would be a test. "Not tonight, thank you, but tomorrow I'd like to tour the house. Every room. I want to understand my new home." "Of course, my lady." Another curtsy, this one perhaps a fraction less stiff. "Dinner will be brought to your room. His Grace dines in his study when he's working." Of course he did. Evelyn waited until she was alone, until the footsteps had faded and the door had clicked shut, before she let herself cross to the window. The view overlooked the gardens, those precise, lifeless gardens that looked like they'd been designed by someone who hated joy. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. This was her life now, this fortress, this isolation, this man who treated her like a business acquisition that needed to be properly managed and displayed. But Evelyn Harrow, no, Evelyn Ashbourne now, had not survived her mother's death, her father's disgrace, and the sharks of London society by being weak. If Victor wanted perfection, she'd give him perfection. She'd learn every rule of this house, master every expectation, and she'd do it so well that he'd have nothing to criticize. And maybe, somewhere in that process, she'd find a way to survive with her soul intact. The first week was a lesson in loneliness. Victor was a ghost. He appeared at breakfast occasionally, reading newspapers while he ate with mechanical efficiency. He never asked about her day, never commented on her dress or her hair or anything about her at all. Twice she'd tried to start conversations about the estate management, thinking perhaps that was safer ground than personal topics. "Do you handle the tenant agreements personally?" she'd asked over Tuesday's breakfast. "Yes." "Perhaps I could—" "That won't be necessary." Conversation over. He worked 18 hours a day, according to the servants' whispered reports. Locked in his study or away on business, always moving, always busy, as if stillness might kill him. The few times Evelyn glimpsed him in the halls, he looked through her like she was furniture. At night, she lay alone in her enormous bed and tried not to think about what marriage was supposed to be. The wedding night had been brief, efficient. Victor had come to her room with the air of a man completing an unpleasant but necessary task, and left as soon as it was finished. He hadn't been cruel exactly, just absent. Like his body was there, but everything that made him human was locked away somewhere she couldn't reach. There had been no repetition of that night. He didn't come to her room, didn't touch her, didn't seem to remember she existed unless they happened to occupy the same space. So Evelyn explored her cage. Mrs. Halloway had been true to her word, providing a comprehensive tour. Evelyn learned that Ravensmore had been built in 1642, that Victor's family had held the duchy for 9 generations, that the portrait of the 5th Duke had been painted by Joshua Reynolds himself. She learned which rooms were used, which were kept closed, which servants handled which responsibilities. She also learned that beneath the perfect surface, things were fraying. The silver needs proper polishing, she observed to Mrs. Halloway on the fourth day, running a gloved finger along a tarnished candelabra in the formal dining room. The housekeeper stiffened. "We maintain standards, my lady." "I'm sure you do, but you're managing 42 servants and 73 rooms with a budget meant for half that staff, aren't you?" Evelyn met her eyes steadily. "I've been reviewing the household accounts. His Grace has been cutting expenses." Mrs. Halloway said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. Evelyn made a decision. If Victor wouldn't speak to her about the estate, she'd manage what she could. She began with the servants. The maids were exhausted, rotating through impossible workloads. The footmen were proud but stretched thin. The cook, a temperamental Frenchman named Philippe, was ready to quit because the budget kept shrinking and he was expected to maintain the same elaborate menus. She started making changes. Small ones because she couldn't authorize spending without Victor's approval, but meaningful ones. She reorganized the cleaning schedules so the workload was more evenly distributed. She convinced Felipe to simplify the menus in exchange for better quality ingredients where it mattered. She learned names, asked questions, actually listened to the answers. The staff noticed. She could see it in the way the maids began to smile when she passed, the way the footmen stood a little straighter. Mrs. Halloway remained reserved, but that calculating look had shifted from assessment to something that might eventually become respect. "You're not what I expected," the housekeeper said one afternoon as they reviewed the week's menus. "What did you expect? Someone decorative, someone useless?" Mrs. Halloway allowed herself a thin smile. "His Grace has a talent for choosing beautiful things and ignoring them." It was the most personal comment anyone had made to Evelyn since she'd arrived. It was also, she suspected, a warning. The first dinner party came in the third week. Victor announced it at breakfast, one of his rare appearances. "We'll be hosting Lord and Lady Pemberton on Saturday. 8 courses, formal dress. I expect you to be flawless." Evelyn set down her teacup carefully. "Of course, will there be other guests?" "The Merriweathers, the Carstairs, Lord Blackwood." He was already standing, already leaving. "Mrs. Halloway has the details." Victor, he paused, hand on the door, turned. For a moment she had his full attention, and it was like standing in front of a winter wind. "What is it?" So many questions crowded her throat. "Why did you marry me if you don't want a wife? Why do you avoid me? Do I disgust you, bore you? Am I doing something wrong?" But she could see in his face that he couldn't answer, or didn't care enough to try. "Nothing," she said quietly. "I'll be flawless." Something crossed his face. She couldn't read it. Then he nodded and left, and she was alone again with her cold tea and colder reality. The dinner party was her first real test. Evelyn spent 3 days preparing. She worked with Philippe on the menu, balancing complexity with elegance. She reviewed every detail with Mrs. Halloway. The flowers, white roses and deep green ivy, simple but sophisticated. The seating arrangement, carefully calculated to avoid putting rivals next to each other. The wine pairings, she'd found an excellent Bordeaux in the cellar that was being wasted. She chose her dress with strategic precision, deep emerald silk that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, cut fashionably but not scandalously, expensive enough to communicate status without being ostentatious. Her maid, a sweet girl named Annie, helped with her hair, swept up in an elegant twist with a few strategic curls to soften the effect. When Evelyn looked in the mirror, she saw what Victor wanted, a perfect Duchess. Flawless, ornamental, empty. She hated it. She hated him for reducing her to this, but she'd be damned if she'd fail. The guests arrived promptly at 7. Evelyn stood beside Victor in the entrance hall, feeling his presence beside her like a wall of ice. He greeted each arrival with practiced charm, a version of himself she'd never seen before. Warm, engaging, almost human. It was a performance. She could see the calculation behind every smile. "Lady Ashbourne." Lady Pemberton swept forward, resplendent in purple silk and diamonds. "How radiant you look. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "You're too kind, Lady Pemberton." Evelyn's smile was perfect. Her voice was perfect. Everything about her was exactly what was expected. "Please, come in. Dinner will be served shortly." The evening unfolded like clockwork. The food was excellent. Philippe had outdone himself. The conversation flowed smoothly, guided by Evelyn's careful questions and strategic silences. She laughed at Lord Blackwood's tedious hunting stories. She complimented Lady Carstairs on her charitable work. She deflected Mrs. Merriweather's probing questions about when an heir might be expected with grace and practiced vagueness. And Victor was magnificent. He commanded the table with effortless authority, discussing politics and finance with Lord Pemberton, charming the ladies with just enough attention to flatter without suggesting impropriety. He was everything a duke should be. He didn't look at Evelyn once. Oh, he acknowledged her when protocol demanded. "My wife has been transforming the house," he said at one point, and Evelyn felt every eye turned to her. She has a remarkable eye for detail. It should have been a compliment. It felt like being displayed. See? I chose well. She performs exactly as required. "His Grace is too generous," Evelyn murmured. "I only hope to be worthy of Ravensmoor's legacy." "I'm sure you will be, my dear," Lady Pemberton said, but there was something sharp in her eyes, something knowing. "It's such a joy to see dear Victor happy at last." The lie hung in the air. Everyone at the table knew it was a lie. They all smiled anyway. That was when Evelyn understood. This wasn't just her test. This was theater. All of London society knew that marriages among their class were transactions, but they maintained the fiction of contentment, the happy couple, the love match. The lie was part of the bargain. She could play that role. She'd played harder ones. The guests left at midnight, lavishing praise on the excellent evening. Lady Pemberton kissed Evelyn's cheek and whispered, "Well done, darling. You'll do splendidly." Evelyn wasn't sure if that was encouragement or a warning. When the door finally closed and the last carriage rolled away, she turned to find Victor watching her, really watching her for the first time in 3 weeks. "You did well tonight," he said. "Thank you." Lady Pemberton's approval matters. You secured it. Of course. Everything was about utility, about advantage. She'd passed the test not because she'd been charming or clever or good, but because she'd been useful. "I'm glad I could be of service," she said, and she couldn't quite keep the edge from her voice. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Is something wrong? Is something wrong?" The question was so absurd she almost laughed. Everything was wrong. She was 22 years old, married to a man who treated her like a piece of furniture, living in a house that felt like a mausoleum, expected to smile and perform and pretend to be happy while slowly dying inside. But she didn't say that. Couldn't say that. "No," she said instead. "Nothing is wrong. Good night, Your Grace." She walked away before he could respond, before he could see the cracks forming in her perfect facade. In her room, Annie helped her undress in silence. When the girl left, Evelyn sat at her vanity and stared at her reflection. The perfect Duchess looked back at her, elegant, poised, empty. She picked up her brush and began pulling pins from her hair, watching it fall in waves around her shoulders. This was who she really was, she thought. Not the polished creature downstairs, but this woman here, messy, uncertain, alone. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. "Come in." She expected Annie, perhaps, or Mrs. Halloway with some question about tomorrow's schedule. It was Victor. He stood in the doorway, still in his evening clothes, looking uncomfortable in a way she'd never seen him look before, like he wasn't quite sure why he was there. He started, then stopped, cleared his throat. "You were exceptional tonight." "You said that already." "I wanted to say it again." He took a step into the room, and Evelyn's heart began to race. Would he? But he didn't come closer, just stood there, this powerful man who commanded rooms full of aristocrats, looking utterly lost in his wife's bedroom. "Evelyn," he said, and it was the first time he'd used her given name since the wedding. I know I'm not what you probably hoped for." She waited, hoping, despite everything, that he might actually say something real, something true. "But you're doing exactly what I need," he continued. "You're perfect for this role, and I appreciate that." The hope died. Of course. Even this, even coming to her room, even using her name, it was all about the role, the performance, what she could do for him. "I'm glad," she said, and her voice sounded far away to her own ears. Is that all? He looked at her for a long moment. She saw something flicker in his face, doubt, maybe, regret. But it was gone before she could be sure. Yes, he said. That's all. Good night, Evelyn. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Evelyn sat very still, staring at the space where he'd been. Then, carefully, mechanically, she went back to brushing her hair. 1 stroke, 2 strokes, 3. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give him that. Instead, she made a decision. If Victor wanted a perfect Duchess, she'd give him one. She'd be so good at this role that he'd have no complaints, no criticisms, nothing to use against her. She'd run his house, charm his guests, perform every duty expected of her with flawless precision. And she'd do it all while protecting the parts of herself he couldn't reach, the parts he didn't want. She'd survive this marriage, but she'd do it on her own terms. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Victor remained distant, appearing for occasional meals and required social functions, then disappearing back into his work. Evelyn ran the household with increasing confidence. She'd gained Mrs. Halloway's grudging respect and Philippe's outright admiration. The servants had stopped looking at her with pity and started looking at her with something like loyalty. She took morning rides through the estate grounds, discovering that beneath the severe landscaping there was actually wild beauty. The woods at the edge of the property were lovely, full of birds and streams and ancient trees that predated the hall itself. It became her refuge, the one place where she didn't have to be perfect. She also began to understand the estate's finances better. Victor was drowning in debt, she realized. Not the kind her father had, no gambling debts here. But his father and grandfather had been terrible managers, bleeding the estate dry with expensive renovations and bad investments. Victor was trying to save Ravensmoor, but it was like trying to bail out an ocean with a teaspoon. That was why he'd needed to marry. Not just for an heir, but for her dowry. £30,000 was a fortune to her father, but to Victor it was barely enough to keep the creditors at bay. She should have hated him more for it. Somehow, understanding made it worse. A month into her marriage, Evelyn made her first real mistake. She'd been reviewing the household accounts again, noting areas where they could economize without sacrificing quality. When she saw Victor at breakfast, a rare occurrence, she brought it up. I've been looking at the expenditures, she said. I think we could reduce costs in several areas without anyone noticing the difference. He looked up from his newspaper. That's not your concern. But I'm the Duchess. Managing the household. Managing the household means ensuring dinners are served on time and the servants don't steal the silver. It doesn't mean interfering with the estate finances. The dismissal in his voice made her flush. I wasn't interfering. I was trying to help. I don't need your help with this. Clearly you do. The words were out before she could stop them. The estate is hemorrhaging money, Victor. I'm not blind. I can see what's happening. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Victor set down his newspaper with careful precision and looked at her with those cold gray eyes. You've been here 1 month, he said quietly. 1 month. And you presume to understand Ravensmoor's financial situation well enough to offer advice? I understand numbers, I understand management, and I understand that pride is expensive when you can't afford it. That's enough. Is it? She was angry now, really angry for the first time since arriving. You married me for my money, Victor. The least you could do is let me actually contribute to this estate instead of just decorating it. He stood abruptly, and for a moment she thought he might actually yell. But when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. You are here to be my Duchess, to host dinners, charm guests, and eventually provide an heir. Those are your contributions. The finances, the estate management, the business decisions, those are mine. Do not presume to cross that line again. He walked out, leaving her shaking with rage and humiliation. Mrs. Halloway appeared in the doorway moments later, her face carefully neutral. My lady, perhaps. Not now, Evelyn said sharply. Then, softer. I'm sorry, Mrs. Halloway. I need a moment. The housekeeper nodded and disappeared. Evelyn sat alone at the breakfast table, staring at her untouched tea. She'd overstepped. She knew it, but the knowledge didn't make the anger fade. This was her life. This was what she'd been reduced to, a decorative object who wasn't allowed to think, to contribute, to be anything more than what Victor had decided she should be. She wouldn't make that mistake again. 2 weeks passed in cold silence. Victor avoided her even more than usual. When they did encounter each other, he was icily polite and nothing more. Evelyn threw herself into the only arena where she had power, society. She began accepting invitations, attending teas and charity events, making connections with the other duchesses and countesses who ruled London's social sphere. She was charming without being effusive, intelligent without being threatening, beautiful without being vain. She cultivated friendships with Lady Pemberton's circle, won over the skeptics, and slowly built a reputation. "The new Duchess of Ravensmore is absolutely delightful," she overheard at one musicale. "So poised, so graceful. The Duke is very fortunate." The Duke didn't notice or didn't care. It was at Lady Thornbury's garden party, 6 weeks into her marriage, that Evelyn first heard the rumors. She was standing with a group of ladies, discussing the upcoming season, when she caught a fragment of conversation from the next group over. "Seen them together 3 times now. Richmond, I heard. His family's estate. Poor Duchess. Only married 2 months and already—" Evelyn's blood went cold. She kept her face perfectly composed, kept smiling at Lady Thornbury's story about her grandchildren, but her mind was racing. Later, she cornered her one genuine friend, Miss Catherine Wells, now Mrs. Dorset, who'd married for love and couldn't hide her pity whenever she looked at Evelyn. "Catherine," Evelyn said quietly, drawing her aside, "what are people saying about Victor?" Catherine's face went carefully blank. "Evelyn, I don't think— Please. I'd rather hear it from you than in whispers behind my back." Her friend sighed. "There's talk of another woman, Lady Miranda Ashford. She's a widow, very beautiful, very available. People have seen them together, at the theater, at Richmond, places where he should be with his wife," Evelyn finished quietly. "It might be nothing," Catherine said quickly. "Just business or old friends or exactly what it looks like." Catherine squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry." Evelyn smiled. It probably didn't reach her eyes. "Don't be. This is exactly the marriage I agreed to, isn't it? He never promised fidelity, only that I'd be his Duchess. That's not good enough. You deserve— What I deserve doesn't matter." Evelyn gently extracted her hand. "Thank you for telling me, Catherine. I should go. I have a dinner to prepare." She left before her friend could see her break. That night, Evelyn stood in her bedroom and faced the truth. Her husband was probably having an affair, and there was nothing she could do about it. Confronting him would be pointless. He'd made it clear she had no claim on his personal life. Leaving was impossible. She'd signed contracts, taken vows, and anyway, where would she go? Back to her bankrupt father? No. She was trapped here. Trapped in this beautiful cold fortress with a husband who didn't want her and a role that was slowly crushing the life out of her. She could fade away. Become one of those sad society wives who took lovers of their own or turned to laudanum or simply disappeared into their own irrelevance. Or she could fight. Not against Victor. She couldn't win that battle. But she could fight for something of her own. Some piece of power in this powerless situation. Evelyn walked to her writing desk and pulled out paper. She began making lists. The servants who were loyal to her, the society connections she'd built, the household powers she actually controlled, despite Victor's restrictions. The estate's needs that she understood better than he probably did. She couldn't change her marriage, but she could change everything else. If Victor wanted a duchess, she'd give him one, but not the decorative, silent, fading kind. She'd be the kind of duchess who ran things, who mattered, who built her own power base so thoroughly that even he couldn't ignore it. She'd make herself indispensable. Not to him, he'd made clear he didn't want that, but to Ravensmore, to the estate, to the people who depended on them both. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find a way to live with herself in the process. The next morning, Evelyn began her campaign. She started with the servants' quarters, which she'd been avoiding because they fell into that gray area between her domain and Victor's. She discovered leaking roofs, inadequate heating, overcrowding that bordered on unsafe. The servants accepted these conditions because they'd been told there was no money to fix them. But Evelyn had been studying those accounts. She knew where the money went, and where it could come from if priorities shifted. She went to Victor's study that evening, knocked once, and entered before he could dismiss her. He looked up from his papers, surprise crossing his face. "I'm working." "The servants' quarters need repairs," she said without preamble. "The roof leaks. The heating doesn't work. It's unacceptable." "We don't have the budget." "We do if we cancel the order for new dining room furniture." She placed her own carefully prepared document on his desk. "That's £700 that could fix the roofs, install proper heating, and still have money left for other repairs. The current dining furniture is perfectly adequate." He stared at the paper, then at her. "I never authorized you to review those expenditures." "You didn't forbid it either. And since my role is to manage the household, I'm managing it. Those servants work 18-hour days keeping this estate running. The least we can do is ensure they're not freezing while they do it." Victor's jaw tightened. She waited for the explosion, the dismissal, the cold reminder of her place. Instead, he picked up her document. "Read it." His eyes moved down the page, and she saw the exact moment he realized her math was correct, her logic sound, her proposal actually better than his original plan. "Fine," he said eventually. "Cancel the furniture. Make the repairs." It wasn't praise, but it was permission. Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you. I'll make the arrangements." She turned to leave. "Evelyn?" She paused, hand on the door. "This doesn't mean I want you involving yourself in the estate finances." "Of course not, Your Grace. This is merely household management. As you said, my domain." She left before he could argue. It was a small victory. But it was hers. The repairs began within the week. Evelyn supervised them personally, watching as workmen patched roofs and installed new heating systems in the servants' quarters. She saw the way the maids' faces lit up when they realized their rooms would actually be warm this winter. The way the footmen stood straighter, worked harder, smiled more. They weren't just servants anymore. They were becoming her people. Mrs. Halloway noticed, of course. The housekeeper appeared at Evelyn's elbow one afternoon as she inspected the completed work in the West Wing servants' area. "They're calling you the People's Duchess," Mrs. Halloway said quietly. Evelyn glanced at her. "Is that disapproval I hear?" "Observation." The older woman's lips twitched, almost a smile. "His Grace's mother never came down here. Not once in 30 years. You've been here 3 times this week. His mother wasn't responsible for their welfare. I am." "Yes, my lady, you are." Mrs. Halloway paused, then added, "They'd follow you anywhere, you know. The staff. You've earned that." It was the closest thing to praise Evelyn had received since arriving at Ravensmoor. She held on to it like a lifeline. But Victor's reaction was harder to read. He'd authorized the repairs, but he watched her now with something like wariness, as if she'd become unpredictable. Dangerous, maybe, in ways he hadn't anticipated. Good. Let him wonder. The invitations started arriving in earnest after that. Word had spread through London society that the new Duchess of Ravensmoor was interesting, not just beautiful, but capable, sharp, someone worth knowing. Lady Pemberton invited her to an exclusive afternoon gathering. Lady Thornbury asked her to co-host a charity auction. Even the formidable Duchess of Wellingham, a woman who could make or break reputations with a single raised eyebrow, sent a personal note requesting Evelyn's presence at her next salon. Evelyn accepted them all. She was building something now, piece by careful piece. A network, a reputation, power that didn't depend on Victor's approval or attention. At the Wellingham salon, she found herself in conversation with Lord Nathaniel Carver, a sharp-eyed politician who'd been watching her all evening. "You're cleverer than they said," he remarked, handing her a glass of wine. "Who's they?" "The gossips. They predicted you'd be decorative and dim. Victor's pretty accessory." He smiled, but it wasn't entirely kind. "You're neither." "Should I be flattered or insulted?" "Realistic. Your husband has enemies, Your Grace, people who'd love to see him fail. A weak wife would be a liability." He studied her over his glass. "But a strong one? That's an asset he probably doesn't deserve." Evelyn kept her face neutral. "You seem to know my husband well. Well enough to know he's drowning. The estate, the debts, the pressure. He's one bad quarter away from losing everything his family built." Lord Carver leaned closer. "And well enough to know he's too proud to accept help. even from his own wife. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you, and because I think you're wasted on a man who doesn't appreciate what he has. His smile sharpened. If you ever need an ally, Your Grace, you know where to find me. He walked away, leaving Evelyn unsettled. Was that a genuine offer of friendship, a warning, or something more calculating? She was learning that in this world, everything was currency. Information, connections, even kindness. It all had a price. 3 months into her marriage, the cracks in Victor's armor began to show. She noticed it first at a dinner party they hosted for a group of investors. Victor was charming as always, brilliant even, discussing railways and manufacturing with the kind of expertise that made men lean forward and listen. But there was tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. When the last guest left, he went straight to his study. Evelyn heard the door slam from 2 floors away. She should have left him alone. That was the pattern they'd established. He worked, she managed the household. They existed in parallel lines that never quite touched. But something made her climb the stairs to the west wing. Concern, maybe. Or just curiosity about what it looked like when the Duke of Ravensmore finally cracked. She didn't knock. The door was ajar, and through it she could see Victor standing at his desk, head bowed, hands braced against the wood like it was the only thing holding him up. Victor? He spun around. His face was a mask, but she'd learned to read the tells, the set of his jaw, the whiteness of his knuckles, the way he held himself just a fraction too still. I'm working. You're falling apart. The words hung between them. For a moment she thought he'd throw her out. Then something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but fracturing, just a little. The investors are pulling out, he said quietly. 3 of them. That railway project. I needed their capital. Without it. He turned away, ran a hand through his hair. Without it, we're finished. The estate can't survive another loss like this. Evelyn stepped into the room. There must be other investors. There aren't. I've already approached everyone with enough capital and interest. This was the last option. His laugh was bitter. My father spent 20 years driving this estate into the ground. My grandfather before him. And I've spent 5 years trying to save it. And I'm going to fail anyway. She'd never heard him sound like this. Defeated. Human. What would you need, she asked, to save the project? 15,000 pounds. Might as well be 15 million. Evelyn's mind raced. 15,000. She'd brought 30 to the marriage as her dowry, but that was already allocated, already spent on debts and urgent repairs. But there were other assets. Things Victor might not have considered because he was too busy being proud and self-sufficient. What about the London house? She said. He looked at her sharply. What about it? You never use it. It's sitting empty 11 months of the year. Sell it, or lease it. The income alone could... That house has been in my family for 6 generations. And it's doing you no good sitting empty while the estate crumbles. She moved closer, pressing her advantage. You can't save everything, Victor. Sometimes you have to choose what matters most. You don't understand. I understand that you're so attached to the symbols that you're losing the substance. That house is a symbol. This estate, the people who depend on it, the future you're trying to build, that's real. He stared at her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Pride versus pragmatism. Legacy versus survival. Even if I wanted to sell, he said finally, it would take months to find a buyer. We don't have months. Then lease it. I know people who'd pay handsomely for a Park Lane address. She was making it up as she went, but it felt right. Lady Pemberton mentioned her cousin was looking for something in that area. And Lord Carver has connections with foreign investors who... Lord Carver? Victor's voice went cold. You've been discussing my finances with Nathaniel Carver? No, he offered to help if I ever needed it, and I... Stay away from him. The sharpness of it startled her. Why? Because I'm telling you to. Because he's dangerous. Because... Victor stopped, visibly struggling for control. Just stay away from him, Evelyn. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand an explanation. But there was something in his face, fear maybe, or something close to it, that made her hesitate. Fine, she said quietly. But the London house, will you at least consider it? He turned back to his desk, braced his hands on it again. She thought he'd dismiss her. Instead, he nodded once. I'll think about it. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't refusal either. Evelyn left before she could push too hard and lose the ground she'd gained. The next week brought a cold snap that turned Ravensmoor's gardens to crystal and made the inside of the hall feel like a cave. Evelyn spent most of her time in the library, the one room that felt almost comfortable, lined with books and warmed by a massive fireplace. She was reviewing the household accounts when Mrs. Halloway appeared, looking troubled. "My lady, there's a woman here to see His Grace, a Lady Miranda Ashford." Evelyn's pen stopped moving. Lady Miranda Ashford, the name from the rumors. The woman Victor had supposedly been seeing. Is His Grace expecting her? I don't believe so, my lady, but she's quite insistent. Every instinct told Evelyn to stay away. This wasn't her business. Victor had made that clear enough, but something stronger than instinct, pride maybe, or just the need to finally know the truth, made her stand. "Show her to the drawing room. I'll receive her." Mrs. Halloway's eyebrows rose a fraction. "My lady, perhaps—" "The drawing room, Mrs. Halloway, please." The housekeeper nodded and disappeared. Evelyn took a moment to compose herself, smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in the window glass. She looked calm, controlled, like a woman who definitely wasn't about to confront her husband's possible mistress. Lady Miranda Ashford was beautiful. That was Evelyn's first thought when she entered the drawing room. Stunning, actually. Dark hair, blue eyes, the kind of effortless elegance that came from breeding and money. She wore widow's colors, but on her they looked fashionable rather than mournful. "Lady Ashbourne." Miranda's smile was warm, friendly even. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I was hoping to speak with Victor, the Duke, I mean." "He's not here." Evelyn kept her voice pleasant. "He's away on business, but perhaps I can help you?" Something flickered in Miranda's eyes. Surprise, maybe. She'd expected to bypass the wife, Evelyn realized, to see Victor directly, the way she probably had before. "It's a rather private matter," Miranda said carefully. "I'm his wife. There are no private matters between us." The lie came easily. Miranda clearly didn't believe it. Her smile sharpened just a fraction, but she couldn't call it out directly. "Of course. It's about some investments Victor, forgive me, the Duke, was considering. I wanted to discuss the terms." "Investments." Evelyn moved to the sofa, sat with deliberate grace. "How interesting. I wasn't aware my husband conducted business with you, Lady Ashford." "We're old friends." Miranda sat across from her, poised and confident. "We've known each other since childhood. Our families' estates border each other." "How lovely. And these investments, they're related to your late husband's interests?" "Something like that." Miranda was watching her closely now, reassessing. "You're very involved in the Duke's affairs, aren't you? That's unusual for a new bride." "Is it? I find it unusual to be excluded from my own household's business." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. They sat there, two women smiling at each other while engaging in a completely different conversation underneath. "I see why Victor married you," Miranda said finally. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone softer, easier to—" She paused, choosing her words. "To overlook." There it was. The confirmation Evelyn hadn't wanted but needed. Miranda had expected Victor's wife to be a non-entity, someone who could be worked around, ignored, dismissed, while she continued whatever relationship she had with him. "I'm sure you'll find I'm quite difficult to overlook," Evelyn said pleasantly. "As for the investments you mentioned, I'll let my husband know you called. If he's interested, I'm sure he'll contact you." It was a dismissal, a clear one. Miranda heard it too. "Of course." She stood, and Evelyn stood with her. "It was lovely meeting you, Lady Ashbourne. I'm sure we'll see each other again. Perhaps at the Pemberton Ball next month? I hear it's quite the event." Miranda's smile tightened. The ball was the social event of the season, and Evelyn had just made it clear she'd be there, with Victor, as his wife, publicly. "Perhaps," Miranda said coolly. "Good day, Lady Ashbourne." When she left, Evelyn stayed in the drawing room, staring at the empty doorway. Her hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat against her dress until they stilled. She'd won that encounter, held her ground, claimed her territory. But the victory felt hollow because the truth underneath it was so bitter. Her husband might be having an affair, and even if he wasn't, other women felt entitled to show up at his house and conduct private business with him. As if Evelyn didn't matter, as if she was just furniture after all. The door opened again, and Evelyn straightened, expecting Mrs. Halloway. It was Victor. He looked tired, rumpled from travel, and completely surprised to find her in the drawing room. "I didn't know you were back," she said. "I just arrived. Mrs. Halloway said Lady Miranda was here." "Yes. I received her." His face went carefully blank. "You received her?" "She wanted to discuss investments. I told her you'd contact her if interested." Evelyn kept her voice level. "Was that wrong?" Victor crossed to the brandy cart, poured himself a drink. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You had no right," he said finally. "Miranda is an old friend. Her visits are what, exactly?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Private? Personal? None of my business as your wife?" "Evelyn, everyone in London is talking about you and her. Do you know that? Do you care?" She was standing now, anger burning through the careful control she'd maintained all day. "I've spent 3 months building a reputation, playing the perfect Duchess, pretending to be happily married while I what?" He turned, and there was something dangerous in his face. "While I do what, exactly? You tell me, Victor. Are the rumors true?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She watched emotions flicker across his face. Anger, frustration, something that might have been hurt if she believed he was capable of it. "No," he said finally. "The rumors are not true. Miranda is a friend, nothing more." "Then why does she feel comfortable showing up here unannounced? Why does everyone assume you're having an affair? Why do you disappear for days and come back looking like you haven't slept and because I'm trying to save this estate?" His voice cracked like a whip. "Because I'm drowning, Evelyn. Because every day I wake up knowing that if I fail, hundreds of people lose their livelihoods. The servants, the tenants, you. Everyone who depends on me." He set down his glass so hard it cracked. "And yes, sometimes Miranda helps because she understands business in ways most women don't. Because she knew my father, knew what he did to this place, and she's one of the few people I can talk to about it without feeling like I'm—" He stopped, turned away. "Without feeling like you're what?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Weak. Failing. Exactly like my father." The words came out raw, unguarded. "He couldn't save this place. And despite everything I've done, every sacrifice I've made, I can't either." Evelyn stared at him. This was the most honest he'd been since their wedding day, maybe more honest than he'd been then. "Then let me help," she said. "You can't—" "I can. I have connections you don't, resources, ideas." She moved closer. "You married me for money, Victor. Fine. But you got more than that. You got someone who's actually good at this, at managing people, at seeing solutions you're too close to see." He laughed, bitter and exhausted. "Like selling the London house?" "Yes. Like selling the London house. Or leasing it. Or finding investors who aren't pulling out." She paused. "Or using the connections I've built these past 3 months instead of shutting me out and handling everything alone like some kind of martyred saint." "I'm not a saint." "No, you're a stubborn fool who'd rather fail alone than succeed with help." She crossed her arms. "The London house, Victor. Yes or no?" He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him fighting with himself, pride versus pragmatism, independence versus desperation. "I'll lease it," he said finally. 6 months. If your connections can actually find someone." "They can." She allowed herself a small smile. "I'll have terms drawn up by the end of the week." "Evelyn," he stopped, seemed to struggle with something. "Thank you." 2 words. Simple. But from Victor, they felt like a victory. She nodded and turned to leave. "One more thing," he said, and something in his voice made her pause. "The Pemberton Ball. I expect we'll need to attend together." "Of course. We're married." "Yes, we are." He picked up his cracked glass, examined it. "Perhaps it's time we started acting like it." Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. Was he actually suggesting they present a united front? Be partners, even just for appearances? Perhaps it is, she said carefully. When she left, she allowed herself a moment in the hallway to breathe. Something had shifted between them. Not into affection, she wasn't naive enough to hope for that, but into something like mutual respect. Acknowledgement that they were in this together, whether they liked it or not. It wasn't love, but it was more than they'd had before. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Evelyn worked her connections ruthlessly, leveraging every relationship she'd built. Lady Pemberton introduced her to a wealthy American industrialist looking for a prestigious London address. Lord Carver, despite Victor's warning, provided information about foreign investors seeking British properties. Within 10 days, she had 3 serious offers for the London house. Within 12, she'd negotiated a lease at twice what Victor had anticipated. "How did you do this?" Victor asked, staring at the contracts she'd laid on his desk. "I listened. I paid attention. I remembered that Mrs. Arlington's nephew was expanding his business and needed office space, that the American, Mr. Rothwell, wanted proximity to Parliament." She smiled slightly. "I made them compete against each other. The price went up accordingly." Victor looked at her with something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Admiration, maybe, or surprise that she was actually competent. "This buys us time," he said. "Enough to save the railway investment, maybe more." "Good." He stood, moved around the desk. For a moment she thought he might actually embrace her, thank her properly. Instead, he extended his hand. "Partners?" he said. She looked at his offered hand. This was it. The line between what they'd been and what they might become. She took it. Partners. His grip was firm, warm. The first time they'd touched in months that wasn't purely ceremonial. He held on just a fraction longer than necessary before releasing her. "The Pemberton ball is in 3 days," he said. "I'll need you to look exceptional." "When have I ever looked anything else?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair point." The ball was everything London society did well. Excessive, glittering, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. The Pembertons' ballroom was enormous, dripping with chandeliers and flowers, packed with every important person in England. Evelyn wore deep sapphire silk that had cost a fortune and looked like it. Her jewels, the Ashbourne family diamonds, caught the light with every movement. She'd spent 2 hours with her maid perfecting her hair, her makeup, every detail. Victor had looked at her when she came downstairs, and something had flickered in his eyes. Appreciation. Desire, maybe. "You'll be the most beautiful woman there," he'd said quietly. "I know." She'd smiled. "That's rather the point." They'd arrived fashionably late, making an entrance. Evelyn had her hand on Victor's arm, and for the first time since their wedding, it felt almost natural. Almost like they were actually married instead of just performing marriage. The first 2 hours were perfect. They danced twice. Victor was an excellent dancer when he bothered. They charmed Lady Pemberton. They accepted congratulations on their marriage, smiled and laughed and played their roles flawlessly. Evelyn was enjoying herself, actually enjoying herself. This was what she'd hoped marriage might be: partnership, respect, mutual support. It wasn't love, but it was something. Then she saw Miranda. Lady Miranda Ashford stood near the entrance, resplendent in emerald green, her dark hair swept up, jewels glittering at her throat. She was beautiful, confident, and she was looking straight at Victor with an expression that made Evelyn's stomach clench. Victor saw her too. Evelyn felt him stiffen beside her. "I need to speak with her," he said quietly. "Victor." "It's business, Evelyn. I promise. Just give me 5 minutes." He walked away before she could respond. Across the ballroom, through the crowd, straight to Miranda. Evelyn watched as they disappeared into an alcove, watched other people notice, watched the whispers start. Lady Pemberton appeared at her elbow. "My dear, are you all right?" "Of course." Evelyn's smile was perfect. Why wouldn't I be? But inside, she was calculating. 3 months of building her reputation, 3 months of being the perfect Duchess, 3 months of turning herself into exactly what Victor needed. And here he was, at the social event of the season, abandoning her to have a private conversation with the woman everyone thought was his mistress. The humiliation was exquisite, sharp, precise. Evelyn stood there, surrounded by London society, watching her marriage become a public joke, and something inside her snapped. She'd been patient, understanding. She'd played by every rule, met every expectation, sacrificed everything she'd wanted to become what he needed. But this was too far. She set down her champagne glass with careful precision. "If you'll excuse me, Lady Pemberton," she said quietly, "I need a moment." She walked across the ballroom. Not toward Victor and Miranda, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, she headed for the terrace, needing air, needing space, needing anything but to stand there and smile while her husband destroyed what little dignity she had left. But she only made it halfway before she heard Victor's voice. "Evelyn, wait!" She spun around. He was crossing the ballroom toward her, Miranda trailing behind him. Every eye in the room was watching. "Not here," she said quietly. "Not now. I need to explain. You need to stop." Her voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it. "You need to go back to your conversation and leave me alone." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Victor?" She was aware they had an audience now. Half the ballroom had stopped pretending not to watch. "Please enlighten me. What exactly requires you to abandon your wife at the most important social event of the season to have a private conversation with another woman?" He glanced around, clearly aware they were making a scene. "Can we discuss this somewhere private?" "Why? You don't seem to care about privacy when it comes to humiliating me publicly." "Evelyn," Miranda stepped forward. "Perhaps I should explain." "You?" Evelyn turned to her, and all the rage she'd been suppressing for months finally found its target. "You should stay silent. This is between my husband and me." "I'm afraid it isn't." Miranda's face was sympathetic, which made it worse. "Victor and I are old friends." "Yes, I've heard." Evelyn cut her off. "I've heard all the excuses, all the explanations. What I haven't heard is the truth." Victor grabbed her arm. "Evelyn, please. Not here." She yanked away from him. The ballroom had gone completely silent now. 300 of London's most important people watching the Duke and Duchess of Ravensmore destroy each other in public. Evelyn didn't care anymore. "You want to know the truth?" Victor said, his voice low and furious. "Fine. Miranda has been helping me investigate financial espionage. Someone's been sabotaging my investments, leaking information to my competitors. She has connections in that world, connections I need." Evelyn stared at him. "Espionage?" "Yes. You've been sneaking around, having secret meetings, letting everyone think you're having an affair because of espionage." "I couldn't tell you. It's too dangerous. If whoever's behind this knows I'm investigating—" "You couldn't tell your wife?" The laugh that came out of her was sharp, bitter. "The woman who just saved your railway investment? Who's been managing your household, building your reputation, doing everything you've asked and more? That wife wasn't trustworthy enough to know the truth?" "It wasn't about trust. It's always about trust, Victor, or the complete lack of it." She was shaking now, months of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "You married me. You brought me here. You gave me a role and expected me to play it perfectly while you kept secrets and made me look like a fool." "I was protecting you." "No, you were protecting yourself. Because even now, even after everything, you can't actually trust anyone. Not Miranda, not me, not anyone." She took a step back. "I'm done. I'm done being your perfect Duchess. I'm done pretending this marriage is anything but a business arrangement that you won't even let me fully participate in. Evelyn, don't." She held up a hand. "Just don't." She walked out of the ballroom, every eye following her, every mouth ready to gossip. She'd just committed social suicide, and she didn't care, because for the first time since her wedding day, she'd told the complete truth, and the truth had burned everything down. The carriage ride back to Ravensmore was silent as a grave. Evelyn sat on one side, staring out at the dark countryside rushing past. Victor sat on the other, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Neither spoke. What was there to say? She'd just destroyed both their reputations in front of 300 witnesses. The scandal would be in every drawing room by morning. The cold Duchess had finally cracked. The perfect marriage revealed as a sham. Society would feast on this for months. Evelyn didn't care. She was done caring what they thought. When they arrived at the hall, Victor climbed out first but didn't offer his hand. She descended alone, her sapphire skirts catching the moonlight like water. The servants who'd waited up quickly disappeared when they saw their faces. Evelyn headed straight for the stairs. "We need to talk," Victor said behind her. "No, we don't." "Evelyn?" She spun around, and the fury in her face made him stop. "You had 3 months to talk to me, Victor. 3 months to trust me with the truth. You chose secrets instead. So now I'm choosing silence." She climbed the stairs without looking back. In her room, Annie helped her undress with careful efficiency, not meeting her eyes. The girl had probably heard everything from the other servants. The whole household would know by tomorrow what a disaster the ball had been. "That will be all, Annie." "Yes, my lady." The maid curtsied and fled. Evelyn sat at her vanity in her chemise, staring at her reflection. Her carefully constructed facade stared back, perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect jewels. All of it a lie. All of it for nothing. She started pulling pins from her hair with vicious efficiency. Each one felt like removing a piece of armor she'd never wanted to wear in the first place. A knock at the door made her freeze. "Go away, Victor." "It's Mrs. Halloway, my lady." Evelyn's hand stilled. "Come in." The housekeeper entered, carrying a tea tray. She set it down without comment, then stood there, waiting. "You can say it," Evelyn said quietly. "Whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking," Mrs. Halloway said carefully, "that you're the first person to stand up to His Grace in 5 years. Possibly ever." Evelyn looked at her in surprise. The older woman's face softened just slightly. "His father was a tyrant. His grandfather worse. Victor learned young that showing weakness meant getting hurt. So he locked everything away and threw away the key." She paused. "Maybe he needed someone to break the lock." "I didn't break it. I destroyed it. Along with any chance we had of—" Evelyn stopped. "Of what?" They'd never had a chance at a real marriage. That had never been part of the bargain. "The staff is with you," Mrs. Halloway said simply. "Whatever happens next, just so you know." She left before Evelyn could respond. Evelyn picked up the teacup with shaking hands. The servants were loyal to her. That was something. Not much, but something. She was halfway through the tea when her door opened again. This time it was Victor. He looked terrible, hair disheveled from running his hands through it, cravat loosened, eyes haunted. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he had the right to enter. "I said go away." "I know." He came in anyway, closing the door behind him. "But we need to discuss what happens next. What happens next is you sleep in your wing and I sleep in mine, and tomorrow we both pretend tonight didn't happen. Isn't that how this works? Evelyn? Or maybe I should go back to London. Let you and Miranda handle your espionage without the inconvenient wife getting in the way." He flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" She stood, and the laugh that came out was sharp enough to cut. "You want to talk about fair? You married me for money and connections. Fine, that was the deal. But you also expected me to be perfect, silent, and ignorant while you played spy games with another woman and let all of London think you were having an affair. And when I finally asked for the truth, the basic respect of honesty, you tell me it was to protect me." She was advancing on him now, months of rage pouring out. "I don't need your protection, Victor. I need you to stop treating me like I'm either an ornament or an idiot." "I never thought you were an idiot." "Then why couldn't you trust me?" The question hung between them. Victor's face worked through several emotions before settling on something raw and painful. "Because everyone I've ever trusted has either died or betrayed me," he said quietly. "My mother died when I was 8. My father drank himself to death 5 years ago, but not before he destroyed everything my family had built. My best friend sold my business secrets to a competitor for £10,000. He looked at her with those gray eyes that suddenly seemed less cold and more desperately, terribly tired. "So yes, I have trouble trusting people, even when they've earned it, even when they deserve it." Evelyn felt some of her anger deflate. Not all of it, she was still furious, but enough to see past it to the broken man underneath. "I'm not them," she said. I know that. But knowing it and believing it are, he stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. I'm trying, Evelyn. Tonight was supposed to be different. We were supposed to be partners. But then Miranda showed up, and she had information about the sabotage, and you chose the mission over your wife, over what we'd started building. Yes. No excuses, just honesty. I did, and I was wrong. The admission shocked her into silence. Victor crossed to her, stopped just out of reach. The espionage is real. Someone's been systematically destroying my investments for 2 years. Leaked information. Bribes. Sabotage. Miranda has connections in the intelligence community. Her late husband worked for the Foreign Office. She's been helping me trace it. Why didn't you just tell me that? Because it's dangerous. Because whoever's behind this has already killed one of Miranda's informants. Because... He stopped, his face twisting. Because I was afraid if something happened to you, it would be my fault. And I can't... He was protecting her. In his twisted, controlling, infuriating way, he'd been trying to keep her safe. It didn't make it right, but it made it comprehensible. You can't lock me away from danger, Victor. I'm your wife. That makes me a target whether you tell me things or not. She stepped closer. But if I know what's happening, I can actually help. Like I helped with the London house. Like I could help with this if you'd just let me. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You want a partnership? This is what partnership looks like. Trust, communication, actually treating each other like allies instead of liabilities. He stared at her, and she could see him fighting with himself. Decades of self-reliance versus the terrifying prospect of actually depending on someone. Tell me everything, she said. Right now. The espionage, the investigation, all of it. Or I leave for London in the morning, and you can explain to society why your wife of 3 months has already abandoned you. It was a bluff. She had nowhere to go, but he didn't know that. Victor's face hardened. Then, slowly, it cracked. All right. Everything. He told her. About the pattern of sabotaged investments over 2 years. The railway deal that fell through because confidential terms were leaked. The shipping contract lost to a competitor who somehow knew their exact bid. The mine accident that wasn't an accident. Equipment tampered with. Safety reports altered. About Miranda's late husband, who'd worked in counterintelligence before his death. About her contacts in that shadowy world. About the investigation that had been going on for 6 months. We think it's someone close, Victor said. Someone with access to my correspondence, my business dealings. Someone I trust. Who? We don't know. That's the problem. Miranda's people narrowed it to 3 possibilities, all men in my inner circle. But we can't prove anything without more evidence. Evelyn's mind raced. Who are the 3? Victor hesitated, then Lord Blackwood, Sir Thomas Weatherby, and Lord Carver. Lord Carver, the man who'd offered to help her, who'd been so friendly, so interested in her success. Carver warned me about you at the Wellingham salon, she said slowly. Told me you were drowning in debt. Offered to be my ally. Victor's face went white. When was this? 2 months ago. I didn't think anything of it at the time. That was right before the shipping contract fell through. He was pacing now. Right before someone leaked our maximum bid, and you just negotiated the London house lease. Those terms were confidential until they were finalized. You think he was using me? Getting information through me? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe testing to see how much you knew, how much I'd told you. Victor stopped, ran his hands through his hair. This is exactly why I didn't want you involved, because now you're a target. I was already a target, you just didn't tell me. Evelyn stood, started pacing herself. But if Carver is the spy, then we can use that. He thinks I'm frustrated with you, shut out, vulnerable. After tonight, she smiled grimly, after tonight, he'll think our marriage is in ruins, that I might be receptive to offers of friendship, alliance. Absolutely not. Why not? It's the perfect cover. Because it's dangerous, Evelyn. These aren't society games. The man Miranda's informant was working on, they found him in the Thames with his throat cut. The casual brutality of it made her stomach turn, but she didn't back down. Then we need to end this quickly, before anyone else dies. before whoever it is destroys everything you've built. We? There is no we in this. You're staying as far away from this investigation as possible. That's not your decision anymore, Victor. You told me the truth. I'm involved now, whether you like it or not. She moved closer, looked him dead in the eye. You want me to be your perfect Duchess? Fine. I'll smile and host dinners and make polite conversation with the man who might be trying to destroy you. I'll get close to him, find out what he knows. No. Yes. Because you can't do it. You're too obvious. Miranda can't do it. She's known to be working with you. But me? I'm the neglected wife, publicly humiliated, desperate for an ally. She could see the plan forming, clear and sharp. It's perfect. It's insane. It's necessary. She grabbed his arm. You said you wanted a partner. Prove it. Let me help. Victor stared at her, and she could see the war in his eyes. Fear versus pragmatism. Protection versus partnership. If anything happens to you, it won't. Because we'll be careful, strategic. She softened her voice slightly. You can't do this alone anymore, Victor. You're exhausted. You're making mistakes. You need help. You need me. I know, he said quietly. And there was something in his voice that made her think he wasn't just talking about the investigation. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. Tomorrow, Victor said finally. We'll meet with Miranda. Plan this properly. But you follow my lead. You don't take risks. And if I say pull back, you pull back immediately. Understood? Understood? He nodded. Started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About tonight. About all of it. I know. He left, and Evelyn sat down heavily on her bed. She just volunteered to spy on a potential murderer. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt alive for the first time in months. The meeting with Miranda the next afternoon was awkward. They gathered in Victor's study. Evelyn, Victor, and the woman society thought was his mistress. Miranda looked as polished as ever in a burgundy day dress, but there was wariness in her eyes when she looked at Evelyn. Lady Ashbourne, she said carefully, I owe you an apology. I should have insisted Victor tell you the truth weeks ago. Yes, you should have. Evelyn sat in the chair across from her, arranged her skirts precisely. But you didn't, so here we are. Miranda glanced at Victor, who was standing by the fireplace looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victor tells me you want to help with the investigation, Miranda continued. I don't want to help. I am helping, whether you approve or not. A small smile crossed Miranda's face. I can see why you chose her, she said to Victor. She's terrifying. You have no idea, he muttered. For the next hour, they went over everything Miranda knew. The pattern of sabotage, the 3 suspects, the dead informant, a man named Daniels who'd worked in Lord Carver's household and had been about to provide proof before someone silenced him permanently. Carver is the most likely, Miranda said, but we can't prove it. He's too careful, too clever. Then we make him careless, Evelyn said. We give him something he wants more than caution. What? Information. Access to Victor's business dealings through me. She looked at her husband. You said you have a new investment opportunity coming up. Something significant? A cotton mill in Manchester. If it succeeds, it could stabilize the estate's finances for years. Perfect. We let Carver think I'm angry enough at you to be indiscreet, that I might share confidential information as revenge. She could see it clearly now. He approaches me, offers sympathy, friendship, support. I let slip details about the mill, and when he tries to sabotage it, we catch him. Miranda leaned forward. That could work, but it's risky. If he suspects you're baiting him, he won't. Not if I play the scorned wife convincingly enough. Evelyn looked at Victor. Which means we need to appear to be fighting, publicly, badly enough that everyone believes our marriage is collapsing. Victor's face went tight. More theater. Effective theater. Evelyn stood, started pacing. We attend the Thornberry dinner next week. We arrive together but spend the evening apart. Cold, distant. I let people see me upset. Maybe I leave early, alone. The gossip will spread that the Ashbournes are on the brink of separation. And Carver will see an opportunity, Miranda finished, a vulnerable Duchess with access to her husband's business secrets. Exactly. Victor was silent for a long moment. Then, how long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Long enough to be convincing, short enough that the trap doesn't give him time to cover his tracks. Evelyn met his eyes. Can you do that? Can you let society think our marriage is failing? Society already thinks that after last night. Fair point. Miranda stood. If we're doing this, we need to be careful. Carver is dangerous. Daniels wasn't his first victim. There was a clerk who fell down the stairs, a dock worker who drowned, both connected to businesses Carver sabotaged. How do you know all this? Evelyn asked. Miranda's smile was thin. Because my late husband taught me how to investigate before he died, and because I'm very, very good at it. There was steel under that polished exterior. Evelyn revised her opinion of Lady Miranda Ashford upward several notches. Then let's begin, Evelyn said. The Thornbury dinner was excruciating. Evelyn and Victor arrived together. They had to maintain some appearances, but the tension between them was palpable. Real, actually, because pretending to hate him while planning to trap a killer was harder than she'd anticipated. Victor barely looked at her all evening. When he did, his face was cold, distant, exactly like it had been in those first weeks of their marriage. The other guests noticed. Of course they noticed. Lady Thornbury kept shooting them concerned glances. Mrs. Merriweather looked positively gleeful, nothing she loved more than scandal, and Lord Carver watched it all with sharp, calculating eyes. He approached Evelyn during the third course, when Victor was deep in conversation with Lord Blackwood. Lady Ashbourne, he said quietly, sliding into the empty seat beside her. You seem distressed. I'm fine, Lord Carver. You're a terrible liar. That's actually quite refreshing in this crowd. He smiled, warm and sympathetic. I heard about the Pemberton ball. Quite the scene. I'd rather not discuss it. Of course. Forgive me. He paused, then, but if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who isn't part of the town's gossip machine, my door is always open. There it was, the opening, exactly as they'd predicted. Evelyn looked at him, let him see uncertainty in her face, vulnerability. That's very kind. Not kindness. Simple friendship. He stood, but not before adding quietly, I know what it's like to feel isolated, trapped. If Victor's making you feel that way, you don't have to endure it alone. He walked away, leaving Evelyn sitting there with her heart pounding. She'd just taken the bait. Now she needed to set the hook. She caught Victor's eye across the table. He was watching Carver's retreat with barely concealed fury. Not fake fury, she realized, real anger that someone was actively trying to recruit his wife. Good. The emotion would sell the performance. Evelyn stood abruptly, loud enough that conversation around her stuttered. Excuse me, I'm not feeling well. She left without waiting for permission, without looking at Victor. Just fled, exactly like a woman at the end of her rope would flee. In the carriage, Victor had stayed behind to maintain appearances. She let herself shake. That had been harder than she'd expected. Playing the victim. Letting Carver think she was weak. But it had worked. She could feel it. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for him to step into it. The waiting was torture. 3 days passed, then 4. Evelyn maintained her performance, cold distance from Victor in public, subtle signs of unhappiness in private. She attended teas and charity events, always looking just slightly too composed, like she was holding herself together by force of will. The gossip was vicious. The Ashbourne marriage was collapsing. The Duchess was miserable. The Duke was a cold bastard who'd broken his beautiful wife. Evelyn hated every word of it, but it was working. On the 5th day, a note arrived. Lady Ashbourne, I find myself in need of advice on a charitable venture and would value your expertise. Perhaps tea tomorrow afternoon? I promise complete discretion. N. Carver. Evelyn showed it to Victor that evening in his study. He's moving faster than we thought, Victor said, reading the note with a tight jaw. Because he thinks I'm vulnerable, that you've pushed me too far. She sat across from him. What information do we give him? Nothing yet. Let him work for it. Play reluctant. Make him think he's winning your trust slowly. And the cotton mill investment? We'll mention it when the time is right. Not too soon, that would be obvious, but soon enough that he has time to act on it. Victor set the note down, looked at her. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Something that might have been pride crossed his face. You're braver than I gave you credit for. Or stupider, hard to tell the difference sometimes. He almost smiled. Almost. If he tries anything, he won't. Not yet. He still thinks I'm just a neglected wife looking for sympathy. She stood. I can handle one afternoon tea with a spy, Victor. Evelyn. He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. Just be careful. I will. She left before the concern in his eyes could make her reconsider. The tea with Lord Carver was a masterclass in manipulation. He'd chosen a quiet tea room far from society's usual haunts. Private, discreet, exactly where you'd meet if you didn't want to be seen. Carver was charm itself, asking about her, actually listening to her answers, making her feel heard in a way Victor rarely did. It was incredibly effective. If she hadn't known what he was, she might have actually liked him. You seem more at ease than at the Thornbury dinner, he observed. I feel safe here. No one watching, no one judging. Is that what it's like? At Ravensmoor? She let her mask slip just a fraction. Victor is demanding. He has very specific ideas about what a duchess should be, how she should act, what she should know, and more importantly, what she shouldn't. That must be suffocating. It is. The truth of it leaked into her voice, making the lie more convincing. I thought marriage would be partnership. Instead, it's just performance. Carver reached across the table, patted her hand sympathetically. Victor's always been controlling. Even at Cambridge, he needed to manage everything, everyone. I hoped marriage might soften him, but he shook his head. Some men are incapable of sharing power. You knew him at university? We were friends, before he decided friendship was a liability and cut everyone out. There was genuine bitterness there, real history. He's brilliant but broken, Lady Ashbourne, and I fear he's breaking you along with him. Evelyn pulled her hand back gently. I'm stronger than I look. I know. That's why I wanted to help. He leaned back, studied her. Victor's making a mistake with the Manchester cotton mill venture, by the way. The numbers look good on paper, but the factory's structural issues are severe. He's going to lose money. Her pulse jumped. He was fishing, testing to see if she knew about the mill. He doesn't discuss business with me, she said carefully. No? Not even something that significant? Carver's smile sharpened. Interesting. Most wives would at least know their husband's major investments, especially one as financially astute as you. She'd been right. He'd researched her, knew about the London house lease, was trying to determine how much she really knew. Victor believes business and marriage should be separate, she said, letting frustration color her voice. I'm allowed to manage the household. Nothing more. How very medieval of him. Carver signaled for more tea. If you ever want someone to actually value your intelligence, Lady Ashbourne, you know where I am. The tea ended with promises to meet again. Carver was reeling her in slowly, carefully, exactly as they'd hoped. When Evelyn returned to Ravensmoor, she found Victor waiting in the library. How did it go? He's suspicious but interested. He mentioned the cotton mill, trying to see if I knew about it. What did you tell him? That you don't discuss business with me, that I'm frustrated by it. She sat, suddenly exhausted. He believes me, Victor. He thinks I'm exactly what he needs, an angry wife with access to secrets. Good. That's good. But Victor looked troubled. What is it? He mentioned Cambridge, that we were friends. Victor's face darkened. I'd forgotten that. He was my best friend, actually, until he wasn't. What happened? I trusted him with a business plan. A week later, it showed up in someone else's proposal, word for word. When I confronted him, he claimed coincidence. I knew it was betrayal. Victor's hands clenched. I cut him out of my life. He's been circling ever since, waiting for an opportunity to hurt me back. The pieces fell into place. This wasn't just business. It was personal. Revenge wrapped in sabotage. Then we end this, Evelyn said firmly. We give him the mill information, catch him in the act, and destroy him before he destroys you. Us, Victor corrected quietly. Before he destroys us. The word hung between them. Us. Like they were actually a unit, a partnership. Maybe they were becoming one. The next 2 weeks were a careful dance of manipulation and misdirection. Evelyn met with Carver twice more. Each time she revealed a little more. Carefully curated information about the cotton mill that Miranda had verified would be tempting, but not immediately suspicious. Technical details, investment amounts, potential returns. Carver soaked it all up like a sponge, offering sympathy and support while mentally cataloging every word. Meanwhile, Victor's men watched, followed, documented. They saw Carver meet with competitors, saw money change hands, saw him passing information that could only have come from Evelyn. It was working, the trap was closing, but then everything went wrong. Evelyn was returning from a charity luncheon when her carriage was forced to stop on a deserted stretch of road. A tree blocked the path, fallen, supposedly, though it looked suspiciously deliberate. "My lady, I'll move it," her driver said, climbing down. Evelyn waited in the carriage, unease prickling her spine. Something felt wrong. The door opened, but it wasn't her driver. It was a man she'd never seen before, rough, scarred, with eyes that had seen violence and enjoyed it. "Lady Ashbourne," he said pleasantly. "You're coming with me." She tried to scream. He clamped a hand over her mouth, dragging her from the carriage with brutal efficiency. She fought, kicked, clawed, bit, but he was stronger. "Stop struggling or I hurt you," he said calmly. "Boss just wants to talk." Boss. Carver. Terror flooded her system. They'd been discovered. The trap had backfired. She was being kidnapped, and no one knew where she was. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rot and river water. Evelyn's hands were bound behind her back, rope cutting into her wrists. Her driver, she'd seen him on the ground, unconscious but breathing, had been left on the road. No one would find him for hours. No one knew where she was. The scarred man pushed her into a chair, rough but not unnecessarily brutal. He hadn't hurt her beyond the initial grab. Professional, she realized with cold clarity. This wasn't random violence, this was a job. "Wait here," he said, and left. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, think. The warehouse was large, mostly empty except for crates and debris. 2 exits she could see, the main door and a smaller one in the back. Windows high up, too high to reach. Her reticule was gone, taken when they'd grabbed her. But they'd left her hairpins. She started working on the ropes immediately, fingers fumbling for the pins in her carefully arranged hair. Annie had taught her this trick weeks ago, a maid's secret for dealing with difficult knots. Evelyn had thought it useless at the time. Thank heaven for practical servants. The door opened before she could make progress. Lord Carver walked in, looking exactly as polished as he did at society dinners. He pulled up a crate, sat across from her like they were having tea. "Lady Ashbourne, I apologize for the dramatics." "Do you?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Because kidnapping seems fairly dramatic." He smiled. "Fair point. But you've put me in a difficult position. See, I've been receiving information from you, very useful information, and I started to wonder, is the Duchess of Ravensmore really this careless, or is she playing a game?" Evelyn kept her face blank. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't." Carver leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. Victor discovered I've been sabotaging him. He told you. And together you decided to feed me false information to catch me. Very clever. Very bold. I almost admire it." "That's insane. Victor barely speaks to me." "Stop." The word was sharp. "I had my people follow yours." "The men watching me?" "Not as subtle as they thought. Miranda Ashford visiting Ravensmore multiple times? Victor suddenly interested in his wife's schedule?" He shook his head. "You're working together. The question is, how much does Victor actually care about you?" Evelyn's blood went cold. "What?" "I've sent him a message. His wife for the cotton mill investment. He pulls out completely, publicly admits the venture was my idea all along and I return you unharmed. He refuses and—" Carver shrugged. "Well, accidents happen." "You're threatening to kill me?" "I'm threatening to make you disappear. There's a difference." He stood. Victor has 2 hours to decide. I suggest you pray he values his wife more than his pride." He left, and Evelyn's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the hairpin she'd finally freed. 2 hours. Victor would pay. She knew he would. But would it be in time? Would Carver actually release her, or was this just a way to destroy Victor completely? She couldn't wait to find out. The hairpin slipped into the rope knot. She twisted, felt something give. Her fingers were cramping, arms aching from the awkward angle, but she kept working. One strand loose, then another. The rope fell away. Evelyn stood on shaking legs, rubbing feeling back into her wrists. Now what? The main door was surely guarded. The back exit was her best chance, but she'd have to cross the entire warehouse to reach it. She started moving, keeping to the shadows behind the crates. Each step was calculated, quiet. She was halfway to the back door when she heard voices. "Told the boss we should have just killed her. Not our call. Besides, Ashbourne will pay. He's too proud not to." 2 men, coming from the main entrance. Evelyn pressed herself behind a large crate, heart hammering. They passed within feet of her, close enough that she could smell tobacco and sweat. When they moved on, she kept going, reached the back door, tested it carefully, locked. Of course it was locked. She looked around desperately. The windows were too high, but there was a stack of crates nearby. If she could climb... "My lady?" Evelyn spun. A young man stood in the shadows, thin, nervous, wearing servant's clothes. She recognized him vaguely. One of Carver's footmen, she thought. "Please don't scream," he whispered urgently. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Then what are you doing here?" "Helping you escape." He glanced toward the main door. "I'm Thomas. I worked for Lord Carver until I realized what he was doing. He killed my friend, Daniels. Said it was an accident, but I knew. I've been trying to find proof to give to Lady Miranda, but..." He stopped, shook his head. "There's no time. The guard change happens in 5 minutes. I can get you out through the cellar, but we have to go now." Evelyn studied him. He could be lying. This could be another trap, but she was out of options. "Show me." Thomas led her to a trap door hidden under debris in the corner. He pulled it open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. It connects to the old dock tunnels. They're mostly flooded, but there's a path. Follows the river for a 1/4 mile, then comes up near the bridge. He pressed something into her hand, a small oil lamp. "Go straight. Don't take any turns. You'll see daylight eventually." "Aren't you coming?" "Someone has to close the door behind you. Make it look like nothing's disturbed." He smiled shakily. "Besides, if I disappear, Carver will know I helped you. This way, I can stay close. Get that proof Lady Miranda needs. Thomas, go, please, before they find you gone." Evelyn climbed into the darkness. The last thing she saw was Thomas's pale face before he closed the trapdoor, plunging her into absolute black. She lit the lamp with trembling hands. The tunnel was exactly as described, damp, narrow, half-flooded with foul water. Evelyn hiked her skirts up and started walking, lamp held high, trying not to think about rats or collapse or getting lost down here forever. The water rose to her knees, soaking her dress. Her shoes were ruined within minutes, but she kept moving, kept following the tunnel as it curved gently along what must be the river's path. Time became meaningless. She might have been walking for 10 minutes or an hour. Her arms ached from holding the lamp. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. Then she saw it. A sliver of gray light ahead. An exit. Evelyn nearly sobbed with relief. She pushed forward, climbing over debris until she emerged into a narrow alley near the Thames. Late afternoon sun hit her face like a blessing. She was free. Now she just had to get to Victor before Carver's deadline expired, and he did something desperate. Evelyn must have looked like a madwoman, soaking wet, covered in filth, hair wild around her shoulders. People stared as she stumbled through the streets, but no one stopped her. This was London. They'd seen stranger things. She had no money, no way to hire a carriage. Ravensmoor was too far to walk, but Miranda's townhouse was close, only a few blocks if she'd emerged where she thought she had. Evelyn ran, her lungs burned, her ruined shoes slipped on cobblestones, but she didn't stop until Miranda's door was in sight. She pounded on it with both fists. "Miranda, open up! It's Evelyn!" The door opened immediately. Miranda stood there, face pale, still in her day clothes. "Thank God," she breathed, pulling Evelyn inside. "Victor's been... How did you escape?" "Long story. Where is he?" "Gone to meet Carver. The ransom demand came an hour ago. He's going to trade the mill for you." No, that's exactly what Carver wants. It ruins Victor financially and proves he's the saboteur." Evelyn grabbed Miranda's arms. "Where's the meeting?" "The old Rotherhithe warehouse by the docks. But Evelyn, you can't..." "I have to. If Victor gives in, Carver wins everything. We need to end this now." She looked down at her ruined dress. "Do you have anything I can wear? And a carriage?" Miranda studied her for a long moment, then smiled, sharp and dangerous. "I have something better. Wait here." She returned minutes later with men's clothing, trousers, shirt, coat. "My late husband's. They'll be big, but they'll work." "Why do I need..." "Because we're not just stopping this meeting. We're ending Carver completely." Miranda's eyes glinted. "I have proof. Thomas, Carver's footman, got it to me this morning. Documents, ledgers, everything we need to destroy him, but we need him to confess in front of witnesses. The warehouse will be full of men loyal to Carver. No, we need him somewhere public, somewhere he can't control." Miranda was pacing now, thinking out loud. "The Blackwood Musicale, tonight. Half of society will be there, including the Home Secretary. If we can get Carver to confess there, he'd never be that stupid. He would if he thought he'd won. If he thought Victor was broken." Miranda grabbed Evelyn's shoulders. "You need to go to that warehouse. Tell Victor you escaped. Make Carver think the plan failed. Then tonight, at the Musicale, we spring the real trap." It was insane, risky, exactly the kind of plan Victor would hate. It was also brilliant. "Let's do it," Evelyn said. The warehouse meeting was tense as a drawn blade. Evelyn arrived first, having left Miranda's carriage several blocks away. She was still in her ruined dress. They decided it would be more convincing, looking exactly like a woman who'd clawed her way out of captivity. Victor was there, standing rigid in the center of the empty space. 3 of his men flanked him, but they were clearly outnumbered by Carver's people. "Victor!" Evelyn called. He spun. For a moment, pure relief crossed his face. Unguarded, raw, real. Then he was moving, crossing the space in long strides, pulling her into his arms so hard it hurt. "You're alive," he breathed into her hair. "Thank God, you're alive." "I escaped. There was a tunnel." She pulled back. "Victor, you can't give him the mill. That's what he wants, to ruin you publicly." "I don't care." His hands framed her face. "I don't care about the mill or the money or any of it. I just needed you safe." Something in her chest cracked at the honesty in his voice. "Well, isn't this touching?" Carver emerged from the shadows, smiling that pleasant smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The devoted husband. I almost believe it, Victor. But we both know this marriage was a transaction, money for a title. Surely you're not telling me you've actually developed feelings." "What I feel is none of your concern," Victor said coldly. "Evelyn's safe. The deal is off." "Is it?" Carver gestured, and his men moved closer. "I don't think so. See, your wife escaping was inconvenient, but it doesn't change the fundamental problem. You know what I've done. You have evidence. I can't let that stand." "So what are you proposing?" "You give me everything. The mill, your documentation, your investigation." Carver's smile sharpened. "And in exchange, I don't kill you both right now and make it look like a tragic accident." Victor's men tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Carver's men did the same. The warehouse felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. "You'd murder us in broad daylight?" Evelyn said. "That's bold even for you." "Who said anything about daylight?" Carver checked his watch. "It's nearly dark. In this neighborhood, no one asks questions about screams from abandoned warehouses." "They will when 2 aristocrats disappear," Victor said. "Will they?" "The Duke and Duchess of Ravensmore, whose marriage was publicly crumbling. Who fought at every social event. It'll look like you ran away together or killed each other in a rage. Either way," Carver shrugged. "Not my problem." Evelyn felt Victor's hand find hers, squeeze once. "Trust me," the gesture said. "All right. Victor said quietly. You win. I'll give you what you want. Victor, no. Evelyn made her voice desperate, pleading, exactly what a frightened wife would sound like. I'm not losing you over this. Victor looked at Carver. The documents are at Ravensmoor. Let us go, and I'll bring them to you tomorrow. Do I look stupid? Your men are outside. The moment you leave, you'll have the authorities here. Then come with us. To Ravensmoor. We'll get the documents together. Carver studied him, suspicious, looking for the trap. Or, Evelyn said quietly, we could all attend the Blackwood Musicale tonight. Neutral ground, public, safe. You get the documents there, we all walk away. Victor looked at her sharply. She met his eyes, willing him to understand. Trust me. Follow my lead. Something shifted in his face. Recognition. Agreement. The Musicale, he confirmed. 8 o'clock. We'll bring everything. Carver laughed. You want me to conduct our business transaction at a society event among hundreds of witnesses? That's exactly why it's perfect, Evelyn said. Neither of us can betray the other with that many eyes watching. You get your documents. We get to leave alive. Everyone wins. Except I still have to trust you won't have me arrested the moment I step into Lady Blackwood's ballroom. You'll have leverage, Victor said. We give you the documents first. You verify them. Once you're satisfied, we go our separate ways. It was a terrible deal from Victor's perspective. Any reasonable person could see that, which was exactly why Carver believed it. He thought Victor was desperate enough to make mistakes. Fine, Carver said finally. The Musicale. But if I suspect a trap, if I see authorities, if anything seems wrong, I'll disappear, and so will any evidence of my involvement. Then I'll spend the next year systematically destroying everything you have left. Understood. They left separately. Victor's hand stayed in Evelyn's until they were in the carriage, out of sight. Then he turned to her. Miranda has proof, she said before he could speak. Documents from Thomas, Carver's footman. Everything we need. But we need him to confess in front of witnesses who matter. The Home Secretary will be at the Musicale, Victor said slowly. So will 3 judges and half the House of Lords. Exactly. We give him fake documents. He thinks he's won, gets cocky, confesses to someone important, and we have him. Victor's face was grim. It's risky. It's our only chance. He's too careful otherwise, too smart. But if he thinks he's destroyed you, he'll want to gloat, to rub it in your face in front of everyone who matters. You're probably right. Victor was quiet for a moment. You scared me today. When I got that message, when I thought I'd lost you. I know. She squeezed his hand. But I'm here. And tonight, we end this. The Blackwood Musicale was in full swing when they arrived. Lady Blackwood, a terrible soprano but an excellent hostess, was performing to a captive audience while servants circulated with champagne. Evelyn and Victor entered together, and the whispers started immediately. The Ashbournes, at a social event after weeks of public discord, looking united, intimate even, with his hand on her back, her body angled toward his. Miranda was already there, dressed in deep purple, holding a small leather portfolio. The fake documents, Evelyn assumed, convincing enough to fool Carver temporarily. Lord Carver arrived 20 minutes later. He looked relaxed, confident, smiling as he greeted acquaintances. But Evelyn saw the calculation in his eyes as they swept the room, cataloging exits and threats. Now? She murmured to Victor. Not yet. Let him settle. Get comfortable. They waited through 2 more painful songs. Then Victor caught Miranda's eye and nodded. Miranda approached Carver, smiling warmly. Lord Carver, how unexpected to see you here. Lady Miranda, lovely as always. He took her offered hand, kissed it. I didn't know you were acquainted with Lady Blackwood. Old friends. In fact, I was just telling the Home Secretary about your charitable work in the East End. He was quite impressed. Evelyn watched Carver's face carefully. There, a flash of interest. The Home Secretary. A man whose opinion mattered, whose approval could open doors. The Secretary is too kind, Carver said. It's simply what any decent person would do. Decent? Miranda's smile sharpened. Is that what you call it? I call it strategic, building goodwill among the poor while you destroy your competitors from the inside. The change in Carver was instant. His pleasant mask cracked. Excuse me? I know what you've been doing, Nathaniel. The sabotage, the murder, all of it. Miranda's voice was quiet but clear. And so do they. She gestured. Evelyn and Victor had moved closer during the conversation, flanking Carver. Around them, others were listening now, pretending to watch the performance but clearly interested in the drama unfolding, including the Home Secretary. You're delusional, Carver said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Then explain Thomas. Explain Daniels. Explain the ledgers showing payments to the men who sabotaged Victor's mines, his shipping contracts, his railways. Miranda opened the portfolio. Oh wait, these are just copies. The originals are already with the authorities. Carver's face went white, then red. You're bluffing. She's not, Victor said quietly. We've been building this case for 6 months. Tonight was just about getting you to show your hand, to prove you're still actively targeting me. By faking your wife's kidnapping? Carver's laugh was sharp. Please, no one will believe. I didn't fake anything, Evelyn said coldly. Your men grabbed me, held me in a warehouse, threatened to kill me unless Victor gave up his investment. There are witnesses. My driver, your footman Thomas, who helped me escape and is currently under protection, ready to testify. You have nothing. Hearsay, circumstantial. We have everything. Miranda pulled out another document. Including your conversation with Sir Robert Henley last week, where you discussed sabotaging the Manchester mill. He's been our informant for 2 months. Gave us everything in exchange for immunity. The music had stopped. Lady Blackwood's voice trailed off as she realized no one was listening. The room was silent, every eye on them. The Home Secretary stepped forward. Lord Carver, I think you'd better come with me. This is absurd. A setup. They're the criminals here. Really? The Secretary's voice was ice. Because I've been reviewing these documents for the past hour. Lady Miranda was kind enough to provide me copies earlier. The evidence is comprehensive. Carver looked around wildly, at the exits where Victor's men now stood, at Miranda's triumphant face, at Evelyn, who stared back with cold satisfaction. He'd lost. Completely. Publicly. You think this is over? Carver's voice was desperate now. Victor's estate is still drowning. The debts are still there. You've won nothing except our reputation, our partnership, our future. Victor moved to stand beside Evelyn, took her hand. You wanted to destroy me, Nathaniel, but you only made me stronger, made us stronger. The Home Secretary gestured, and 2 men Evelyn recognized as plainclothes police moved in. Lord Nathaniel Carver, you're under arrest for conspiracy, sabotage, and murder. Anything you say. Carver lunged, not toward the police, toward Evelyn. His hand went for something in his coat, something metal and sharp. Victor moved faster than she'd thought possible, pushing her aside, taking the blade meant for her across his forearm. Blood bloomed instantly, bright against white linen. Then everything was chaos. The police tackling Carver, ladies screaming, men shouting, Lady Blackwood fainting dramatically across a chaise. Evelyn grabbed Victor's arm, pressing her hand over the wound. You're bleeding. I'm fine. It's shallow. But he was pale, breathing hard. Are you hurt? No, thanks to you. She looked up at him, this man who'd just taken a knife for her. You could have been killed. So could you. I wasn't allowing that. His good hand came up, cupped her face. I told you, I am not losing you. Not to him, not to anyone. Around them, police were hauling Carver away. He was still shouting, still protesting, but it was over. Everyone had seen. The Home Secretary, 3 judges, half the aristocracy, witnesses who mattered. Carver was finished. Miranda appeared at their side, her face flushed with triumph. Well, that was more dramatic than planned. Is the evidence actually real? Evelyn asked. Every word. Thomas got us everything. With Sir Robert's testimony, Carver will hang. She looked at Victor's arm. You need a doctor. I need a drink, Victor said. And then I need to take my wife home. The scandal dominated London for weeks. Lord Carver's arrest, the revelation of years of sabotage, The attempted murder in Lady Blackwood's drawing room, witnessed by half the ton. The Duke of Ravensmore taking a blade meant for his Duchess. Society ate it up. The cold marriage had been an act. The Ashbournes were actually devoted, passionately so. Romantic, even. Evelyn found the revised narrative hilarious. Victor found it irritating, but neither corrected it. The evidence against Carver was overwhelming. Sir Robert's testimony, combined with Thomas's documents and Miranda's investigation, painted a picture of systematic destruction spanning years. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was unanimous. Carver was sentenced to hang. Evelyn attended the sentencing with Victor, watched Carver's face as the judge pronounced his fate, saw the moment he finally understood he'd lost everything. "Does it feel like justice?" Victor asked as they left the courthouse. "It feels like survival," Evelyn said. "Justice is just a prettier word for it." The financial situation improved slowly. With Carver's sabotage ended, Victor's investments began to stabilize. The cotton mill succeeded, the railway project moved forward. The estate's debts didn't disappear, but they became manageable. And Evelyn's network, the connections she'd built, the reputation she'd cultivated, became invaluable. Investors who'd avoided Victor now sought him out because his Duchess vouched for him. Opportunities appeared because she'd befriended the right people. They became a team. Actually, genuinely a team. 3 months after Carver's arrest, Victor found Evelyn in the library, reviewing estate accounts. "You're frowning," he observed. "These numbers don't balance. Someone's made an error in the grain calculations." He moved to look over her shoulder, and she was suddenly very aware of his proximity, his warmth, the scent of him, soap and paper and something distinctly Victor. "Here," he said, pointing. "The clerk transposed these digits. Should be 500, not 50. "Ah, that makes more sense." She made the correction. "We're actually ahead this quarter. Thanks to you." The London house lease alone was practical, not genius. But she smiled. "Though I won't deny I'm better at this than you expected." "You're better at everything than I expected." Victor was quiet for a moment. Then, "I owe you an apology. Several, actually." "For which offense specifically? There are so many to choose from." His mouth twitched. "For treating you like an obligation instead of a partner. For not trusting you when you deserved it. For being a stubborn fool who nearly got you killed." "That's a good start." "I thought I was protecting you by keeping you separate from the darker parts of my life. But I was really just protecting myself. From the risk of caring, of depending on someone." He moved around the desk to face her properly. "You terrified me, Evelyn. Still do." "Why?" "Because caring about you means you can hurt me. And I've spent my entire adult life building walls to prevent exactly that kind of vulnerability." Evelyn stood, moved closer. "And now? Now I think those walls were just making me weaker, more isolated, more—" He struggled for the word. "Alone. Even when I wasn't." She reached up, touched his face. He leaned into it like he was starving for contact. "We're not alone anymore," she said quietly. "We're partners. Actually, genuinely partners. The kind who trust each other. Who fight together instead of against each other. Is that what we are?" "I think it might be." She smiled. "Also, I'm fairly certain I'm in love with you, which wasn't part of the original bargain, but there it is." Victor went very still. "You love me. Apparently. Despite your many, many flaws." "Evelyn, you don't have to say it back. I know this wasn't what you wanted when you married me. I just thought you should know that—" He kissed her, cut off her rambling with his mouth on hers, desperate and clumsy and absolutely perfect. His hands framed her face like she was precious, breakable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said roughly. "I've loved you since you confronted me about the servants' quarters and looked at me like I was an idiot for not seeing the obvious solution. Maybe before that. I don't know. But I love you. And I'm terrified of it, and I'm never letting you go." Evelyn laughed, half sob, half joy. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." They stood there in the library holding each other, while outside the sun set over Ravensmore and the estate continued its work and life went on. They'd survived, more than survived, they'd won. And in the process, They'd found something neither had been looking for, a marriage that was actually real. The kiss in the library became kisses. Many kisses. Victor pulled her closer, and Evelyn went willingly, her hand sliding into his hair, messing up the perfect arrangement he always maintained. He made a sound low in his throat, surprise, pleasure, relief, and backed her against the desk. "We should," she started. "Should what?" His mouth found the spot below her ear that made her shiver. "Be sensible? Proper? I'm done being proper with you, Evelyn." "I was going to say we should lock the door." He pulled back, eyes dark and intense. Practical as always. "One of us has to be." He crossed to the door, turned the key with a decisive click. When he came back, there was something different in his face. Not the cold mask she'd lived with for months, not even the warmer version she'd begun to see recently. This was raw, unguarded, utterly honest. "I want this to be real," he said quietly. "Not a performance for society, not a convenience, real. It already is real." She touched his face, felt him lean into her palm. "We're just finally admitting it." What happened next wasn't the efficient, dutiful coupling of their wedding night. It was messy and desperate and absolutely perfect. They knocked over a stack of ledgers. Victor's carefully organized papers scattered across the floor. Evelyn's hair came completely undone. Neither of them cared. Afterward, they lay on the sofa, far too small for two people, but they made it work, tangled together, breathing hard. "The servants are going to know," Evelyn said eventually. "They already know. Mrs. Halloway's not subtle." Victor's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "She threatened to poison my tea if I hurt you again." She did not. She absolutely did. Very politely, very seriously. He smiled against her hair. "Your people are terrifyingly loyal." "Our people," she corrected. "They're our people now." The word settled between them, warm and right. Our. Not his or hers, but theirs together. A knock at the door made them both freeze. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Halloway's voice, carefully neutral. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. I assume you'll be dining together this evening." Victor looked at Evelyn. She bit her lip, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of having this conversation while half-dressed on the library sofa. "Yes, Mrs. Halloway," Victor called. "Together." "Excellent. I'll have cook prepare something special." A pause. "And perhaps your Grace would like fresh linens sent to the Duchess's chambers? Or should I prepare the Duke's suite for two?" Evelyn went scarlet. Victor actually laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and genuine. "The Duke's suite," he said. "Thank you, Mrs. Halloway." Footsteps retreated. Evelyn buried her face in Victor's shoulder. "She absolutely knows." "She's pleased about it. That makes it worse somehow." "Or better." Evelyn looked up at him. "The whole household's been watching us circle each other for months. They probably have bets on when we'd finally—" "Don't finish that sentence. I can't handle knowing the staff gambles on our relationship." She kissed him to distract from her laughter. It worked beautifully. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Real change never did. But over the following weeks, Ravensmoor shifted. The cold fortress became something warmer. Victor smiled more. Evelyn stopped performing perfection and just existed. They fought occasionally, both were too stubborn not to, but the fights were honest now. Productive. They worked side by side on estate business. Victor stopped hiding the finances from her, and Evelyn's insights proved invaluable. She saw patterns he missed, made connections he hadn't considered. Together, they turned the struggling estate into something actually profitable. The servants noticed. Of course they noticed. "You're happy," Mrs. Halloway observed one morning, finding Evelyn humming while reviewing menus. "I am," Evelyn admitted. "Strange, isn't it? This was supposed to be a business arrangement, a transaction. The best marriages often start as transactions and become something more." The housekeeper allowed herself a rare smile. "His Grace is different too, lighter, like he's finally stopped carrying everything alone." "He's not alone anymore." "No, my lady, neither of you are." Society remained fascinated by the Ashbournes. The gossip shifted from scandal to romance. The cold Duke tamed by his clever Duchess. The calculated marriage transformed by genuine affection. Evelyn hated the simplified narrative, but couldn't deny its usefulness. Doors opened. Opportunities appeared. People wanted to be associated with their success story. At the Pemberton Spring Ball, the first major event since Carver's arrest, Evelyn and Victor arrived to applause. Actual applause, like they'd accomplished something heroic instead of just surviving each other. "This is ridiculous," Victor muttered. "Smile and accept it graciously," Evelyn advised. "We need these people." "I need you. The rest can go hang." She stepped on his foot, gently. He grinned and pulled her onto the dance floor. They danced 3 times that night, scandalous for a married couple, but no one criticized. The Duke and Duchess of Ravensmore were in love. Society adored love. "Did you ever imagine this?" Evelyn asked during the third waltz. "When you proposed, when you saw me as just another business transaction?" "No, I imagined a wife who'd perform her duties and stay out of my way." He spun her gracefully. "I got a partner who challenges me constantly and makes everything more complicated." "Is that a complaint?" "It's the highest praise I can give." Lord Pemberton approached them after the dance, his usually jovial face serious. "Your Grace, Lady Ashbourne, might I have a word?" They followed him to a quieter corner. Victor's hand found Evelyn's instinctively, a united front, whatever was coming. "I wanted to apologize," Pemberton said heavily, "for not seeing what Carver was doing sooner, for not believing Lady Miranda when she first raised concerns. If I'd acted faster, you might have been spared considerable pain." "You couldn't have known," Victor said. "I should have. Carver and I served on committees together. I saw signs, inconsistencies, questions about his finances, and I dismissed them." Pemberton looked genuinely troubled. "I've been reviewing my own business dealings, making sure no one else is being similarly targeted." "That's wise," Evelyn said. "Carver wasn't working alone. He had informants, people who helped him." "We're pursuing those connections," Pemberton confirmed. "Several arrests are pending. The network was larger than anyone suspected." He paused. "But I wanted you to know what you did, exposing him publicly, risking yourselves. It matters. Others are safer because you refused to stay silent." Victor nodded stiffly. He'd never been comfortable with gratitude. When Pemberton left, Evelyn squeezed Victor's hand. "You helped people. Saved them from what we went through." "We helped people," he corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "I know," she smiled. "But it's nice to hear you admit it." The spring turned to summer. Ravensmore bloomed, literally. Evelyn had the gardens redesigned, bringing in flowers and softness to balance the severe architecture. Victor complained about the expense, then planted roses outside her window himself when he thought she wasn't watching. She watched. She always watched him now, learning his tells, the way he rubbed his temple when stressed, how his left hand would drum against his thigh when he was thinking through a problem. The small smile he got when he was genuinely pleased but trying to hide it. He learned hers too, that she bit her lip when uncertain, that she hummed unconsciously when happy, that she needed solitude sometimes, not because she was angry, but because she was overwhelmed and needed to reset. They learned to navigate each other, not perfectly. They still stepped on toes, still misread signals, but better. Miranda visited frequently, ostensibly for tea, but really to gloat about Carver's conviction and plan their next social maneuvers. She and Evelyn had become genuine friends, bound by shared danger and mutual respect. "You've done well," Miranda said one afternoon, watching Victor and Evelyn argue companionably about crop rotation across the garden. "Taming the untamable Duke." "I didn't tame him. I just convinced him that walls are exhausting to maintain." "Same result." Miranda sipped her tea. "My late husband would have liked you. He always said the best partnerships were between equals who challenged each other." "Were you happy? In your marriage?" "Deliriously. For 12 wonderful years before he died." Miranda's smile was sad but genuine. "I hope you have longer. You and Victor, you're building something rare." Evelyn looked at her husband, who was now laughing at something the head gardener had said. She'd never seen him laugh like that before they'd found each other. Free. Unguarded. "We are," she agreed quietly. The first real test of their rebuilt marriage came in August. A letter arrived from Evelyn's father. She recognized the handwriting immediately, and her stomach clenched. She hadn't heard from Edward Harrow since her wedding day. He'd taken Victor's money and disappeared into whatever hole men like him disappeared into. "What does he want?" Victor asked, finding her staring at the unopened letter. "I don't know. I'm afraid to look." "Then don't look alone." He sat beside her, solid and steady. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." She opened the letter. Her father was dying. Consumption. Destitute. Begging for money to pay his debts so he could die with some dignity. The manipulation was obvious, the timing convenient, but underneath it, Evelyn could hear genuine desperation. Her father was a terrible man who'd sold his daughter to save himself. He was also dying alone and afraid. "I should feel nothing," she said quietly, "after what he did to me. To us. But you don't feel nothing." "I feel angry and sad and—" She stopped, frustrated with herself. "He doesn't deserve my sympathy." "No, he doesn't." Victor took the letter, read it carefully. "But sympathy isn't about deserving, it's about who you are, not who he is." Evelyn looked at him in surprise. "I hated my father," Victor continued, "for years. For what he did to the estate, to our family name, to me." He set the letter down. "When he died, I felt relief, but also regret that I'd wasted so much energy on hatred instead of just letting go." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if you want to help him, I support that. If you want to ignore him, I support that too. Whatever you decide, it's your choice, your father, your call." The trust in those words made her throat tight. "I want to help," she said finally. "Not for him, for me, so I can move forward without regrets." "Then we'll help." They sent money, not to Edward directly, they weren't stupid, but to a reputable physician to manage his care. Enough to keep him comfortable until the end. No more, no less. Edward Harrow died 6 weeks later. Evelyn attended the funeral, a small, sad affair with few mourners. Victor stood beside her throughout, a silent anchor. "I forgive you," she whispered at the graveside. Not because her father could hear, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting, and she was done being exhausted. Victor's hand found hers, squeezed once. They left together. The announcement came in October. Evelyn had suspected for weeks but waited to be certain. Morning sickness, exhaustion, the subtle changes in her body that she recognized from helping her mother through pregnancies years ago. She told Mrs. Halloway first, who cried, actually cried, with joy. Then Annie, who squeaked and hugged her before remembering protocol. Then Philippe, who immediately began planning elaborate meals to support the baby's development. Telling Victor was harder. Not because she feared his reaction, she knew he'd be pleased, but because this changed everything. An heir. The entire purpose of their marriage, finally fulfilled. Would he pull back now? Retreat into that cold distance now that she'd served her function? She found him in the study, reviewing contracts. He looked up when she entered, smiled that soft smile he saved just for her. "Evelyn, I thought you were resting. I need to tell you something." The smile faded. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Nothing's—" She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Victor went completely still, his face unreadable. "Victor, say something." He stood slowly, crossed to her. His hands framed her face, and his eyes were bright with something she couldn't name. "You're certain?" "Yes, the doctor confirmed it this morning. A baby." He said it like he was testing the word. "Our baby." "Yes. Are you— Is this—" He kissed her, gentle and reverent and full of so much emotion it made her dizzy. "I'm terrified," he said against her lips. "I'm going to be a terrible father. I had terrible examples. I don't know how to—" "You'll learn. We'll learn together." She pulled back to see his face. "You're not your father, Victor. You're not even the man you were a year ago. You're better. We're better. Because of you. Because of us." He pulled her close, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he repeated. "I'd given up hoping for this. For any of this." "Hope is terrifying," Evelyn agreed, "but necessary." They stood there, holding each other, contemplating the impossible future they'd built from nothing. The pregnancy was difficult. Evelyn was sick constantly in the beginning, then exhausted, then uncomfortable as her body changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. Victor hovered anxiously, driving her mad with his concern. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she snapped one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from reviewing estate accounts. "You need rest. I need purpose. I need to feel useful. I need you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass." He looked stricken. "I'm trying to protect you." "I know, but I don't need protection from paperwork. I need you to trust that I know my own limits." It was their first real fight in months. Victor stormed out. Evelyn cried from hormones and frustration. Mrs. Halloway found her an hour later, red-eyed and miserable. "He means well," the housekeeper said gently. "I know. That makes it worse somehow." "His mother died in childbirth. Did he tell you that?" Evelyn went cold. "No, he never mentioned. He was 8, old enough to remember, to hear her screaming, to see his father's grief." Mrs. Halloway sat beside her. "He's terrified of losing you the same way." Understanding crashed over her. Victor's hovering wasn't about control. It was about fear. Raw, terrible fear that history would repeat itself. She found him in the stables, brushing down his horse with more force than necessary. "Mrs. Halloway told me about your mother," she said quietly. His hands stilled. "I should have mentioned it." "Yes, you should have." She moved closer. "I understand now why you're so worried. But Victor, I'm healthy, strong. The doctor says everything is progressing normally." "That's what they said about my mother." "I'm not your mother. This is different." "You can't promise that." "No, I can't." She took his hand, placed it on her stomach where the baby was just beginning to show. "But I can promise I'm doing everything right, following every instruction, resting when I need to, and I can promise that wrapping me in cotton wool won't keep me safe. It'll just make me miserable." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I can't lose you." "You won't. But you have to trust me. Trust that I know when I need to stop, when I need help, when I need you to just—" She searched for the words. "To just love me instead of trying to save me." His forehead dropped to hers. "I do love you. So much it terrifies me." "Good. Be terrified. But don't let it make you stupid." He laughed, wet and rough. "You're the only person who talks to me like this. Someone has to." The baby came in March, after 18 hours of labor that Victor insisted on pacing through despite being barred from the room. Evelyn had never experienced pain like this, never felt so utterly out of control of her own body. She screamed, swore, threatened to murder Victor for doing this to her. The midwife found it all very amusing. "First babies are always dramatic," she said cheerfully, wiping Evelyn's face. "You're doing beautifully." "I'm dying." "You're not dying. You're bringing life into the world. Now push." When the baby finally arrived, a girl, healthy and furious at being evicted from her warm home, Evelyn burst into exhausted tears. "A daughter," the midwife said, placing the screaming infant on Evelyn's chest. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." She was. Tiny and red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Victor was allowed in moments later. He looked terrified, pale, like he'd aged 5 years in 18 hours. Then he saw them, his wife and daughter, both alive, both well, and everything in his face transformed. "Evelyn," he breathed, "you did it. You're all right." "I told you I would be." She was too tired to gloat properly. "Come meet your daughter." He approached slowly, carefully, like sudden movements might shatter the moment. When he looked down at the baby, his expression did something complicated. "She's so small." "She'll grow." Evelyn shifted the baby slightly. "Want to hold her?" I don't know how." The midwife efficiently arranged Victor's arms, placed the baby in them, gave instructions. He listened intently, face serious, like this was the most important lesson of his life. The baby stopped crying, looked up at her father with dark, unfocused eyes. "Hello?" Victor said softly. "I'm your father. I'm going to be terrible at this, but I promise to try my best." You're already doing fine, Evelyn assured him. They named her Catherine, after Evelyn's friend, but also because they both liked how it sounded. Catherine Eleanor Ashbourne. Daughter, heir, the future. The christening was a massive affair that Victor wanted to skip, and Evelyn insisted they endure. Half of London attended. London, everyone wanted to see the baby, coo over her, congratulate the parents on their obvious happiness. They act like we did something revolutionary, Victor muttered, holding Catherine with practiced ease now. People have babies all the time. Yes, but we're interesting, Evelyn said. The cold marriage that became a love story. The calculated duke who melted. Society loves a narrative. I hate narratives. You hate performing. There's a difference. Lady Pemberton swept up, demanded to hold the baby. Catherine, being Victor's daughter, stared at her with suspicious intensity. She has your eyes, Lady Pemberton told Victor, but her mother's determination. Look at that glare. That's a blessing and a curse, Victor said. Mostly a blessing, Evelyn corrected. The party continued for hours. Toasts were made, gifts presented. Everyone agreed that Catherine was the most beautiful baby ever born. Obvious exaggeration, but Evelyn appreciated the sentiment. Miranda cornered them near the end, looking unusually serious. I have news, she said quietly, about Carver's execution. It's scheduled for next week. Victor's face hardened. Good. Is it? Miranda looked between them. He'll die, but his damage, the lives he destroyed, the people he hurt, that doesn't disappear. No, Evelyn agreed, but it stops. And others are safer because he's gone. That's what I tell myself too. Miranda smiled sadly. Anyway, I wanted you to know. In case you wanted to, I don't know, bear witness. Find closure. I have closure, Victor said, looking at Evelyn and Catherine. I have everything I need right here. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. A year ago, Victor would have insisted on attending the execution, on watching his enemy die. Now he was choosing life over revenge. They'd both changed so much. Thank you for telling us, Evelyn said to Miranda, and thank you for everything else. We wouldn't have survived without you. You would have. You, just differently. Miranda kissed her cheek, then Victor's. Be happy, you two. You've earned it. The weeks after Catherine's birth blurred together in a haze of sleeplessness and wonder. Evelyn had expected motherhood to be difficult, but not this consuming. The baby needed constant attention, feeding, changing, soothing. The servants helped, but Evelyn insisted on doing much of it herself. You need rest, Victor would say, finding her at 3 a.m, walking the halls with a fussing Catherine. She needs her mother. She needs her mother healthy. He'd take the baby gently. I can walk her. You sleep. You have work in the morning. So do you. We'll manage. They did manage. Barely. Together. Catherine grew. Changed daily, it seemed. Her eyes settled into gray like Victor's. Her personality emerged. Stubborn, curious, loud when displeased. She's exactly like you, Victor observed one evening, watching Evelyn try to convince their daughter that sleeping was actually pleasant. She's like both of us, stubborn from you, loud from me. You're not loud. I am when necessary. Catherine finally settled, tiny fists curled against Evelyn's chest. Remember the Pemberton ball? I was extremely loud. That was different. That was survival. So is this. Just a different kind. Victor sat beside them, his arm around Evelyn's shoulders. They sat like that often now, together, quiet, watching their daughter breathe. I never imagined this, Victor said eventually. This kind of contentment, this kind of peace. Because you didn't think you deserved it. I didn't. I don't. He looked at her. But I'm going to work every day to be worthy of it anyway. You already are, you idiot. She leaned into him. We both are. We survived each other, built something real from nothing. That's worth more than any perfect beginning. Is it enough for you? The question surprised her. What do you mean? You didn't choose this marriage, this life. It was forced on you. His face was troubled. If you could go back knowing everything, would you still say yes? Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it, The fear of that first night at Ravensmoor, the loneliness, the humiliation, the danger, all of it leading to this moment, her husband beside her, her daughter in her arms, a future she'd never dared hope for. Yes, she said finally, because this, all of this, was worth fighting for, worth the pain, worth everything. Victor kissed her temple. I love you. I know. I love you too. Catherine made a small sound in her sleep. They both froze, waiting to see if she'd wake. She didn't, just settled deeper into dreams. We should probably put her in the cradle, Evelyn whispered. Probably. Neither of them moved. The summer brought visitors. Catherine Wells, now Catherine Dorset, came with her husband and 3 children. She and Evelyn sat in the gardens while the children played, and Catherine cooed over baby Catherine. You look happy, Catherine said. Really, genuinely happy. Not performing it. I am happy. It's terrifying. Because you keep waiting for it to end? Because I know how fragile it is, how easily everything could fall apart. Evelyn watched Victor playing with the Dorset children, looking relaxed in a way she'd never seen. We almost lost this, so many times. But you didn't. You fought for it, both of you. Catherine squeezed her hand. That's what makes it real. Not that it came easily, but that you chose it. Keep choosing it. When did you get so wise? Motherhood, it either breaks you or makes you philosophical. I chose philosophy. They laughed, and it felt good. Normal. Like Evelyn had finally found solid ground after months of floating. The autumn brought challenges, a bad harvest, unexpected repairs to the West Wing. Catherine's first illness, nothing serious, but terrifying for first-time parents who'd never dealt with a feverish infant. They handled it together. Victor didn't try to manage everything alone anymore. Evelyn didn't hesitate to ask for help when overwhelmed. They fought occasionally, usually about money or how to handle staff issues or whether Catherine was too young to travel to London. But the fights were productive now, ended in compromise rather than cold silence. We're getting better at this, Evelyn observed after one such argument about estate investments. At what? Fighting? At being married. At being partners. She leaned against his desk. A year ago, you'd have made that decision alone and informed me after. A year ago, you'd have resented me for it and plotted revenge. Exactly. Now we argue, find a solution we both can live with, and move on. She smiled. Progress. Exhausting progress. All the best things are exhausting. He pulled her into his lap, which she was fairly certain violated some rule about professional behavior in the study. She didn't care. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me. On us. When it would have been easier to just... He stopped, struggled for words. To just fade into the role I assigned you and hate me quietly. I did hate you. For a while. Evelyn touched his face. But then I realized hating you was giving you too much power, so I decided to take power back. Build something of my own. And accidentally built us in the process. Not accidentally, deliberately. I chose this, Victor. Choose it every day. You're not a burden I'm enduring. You're a partner I'm grateful for. He kissed her, deep and thorough and full of everything he couldn't quite say. Catherine's first birthday came with entirely too much fanfare. Victor wanted a small family gathering. Evelyn compromised with a medium-sized party that only included 50 people. Catherine, being one, had no opinion on the matter. The baby sat in her high chair, covered in cake, looking bewildered by all the attention. She'd started walking recently, stumbling really, and had developed a shriek that could shatter glass when displeased. She's going to be a terror, Mrs. Halloway predicted fondly, watching Catherine grab handfuls of cake and smash them enthusiastically. She already is, Victor said. But he was smiling. He smiled constantly around his daughter. She's spirited, Evelyn corrected. Independent, strong-willed. Like her mother. Like both her parents. The party was chaos. Children running everywhere. Adults drinking too much champagne. Catherine eventually having a spectacular meltdown that required both parents to escape to a quiet room until she calmed down. This is insane, Victor said. bouncing a hiccuping Catherine while Evelyn collapsed on the sofa.
Why did we agree to this?
Because we're idiots who love our daughter. Fair point. Catherine settled eventually, falling asleep against Victor's shoulder with the sudden completeness that only children managed. He stood there, not wanting to move and wake her. Evelyn watched them, her husband and daughter both looking peaceful, and felt something settle in her chest. Contentment, peace, home. This was home, not the estate or the title or the social position. This moment, this family, this imperfect, difficult, absolutely perfect life they'd built. I wouldn't trade this, she said quietly. Any of it, even the hard parts. Victor met her eyes across the room. Neither would I. The final piece fell into place in winter. Evelyn was reviewing correspondence when she found a letter from Cambridge University, addressed to Victor but marked for her attention as well. She opened it, curious. It was an invitation. The university was establishing a new program for estate management and agricultural innovation. They wanted Victor to be on the advisory board. Wanted both of them, actually, recognizing Evelyn's contributions to modernizing Ravensmoor's operations. "Victor," she called, "you need to see this." He appeared from his study, Catherine balanced on one hip. Their daughter had recently become attached to following him everywhere. "What is it?" She handed him the letter, watched his face as he read it. "They want us both," he said slowly, "to advise, to teach, to share what we learned, help others avoid the mistakes we made." Evelyn stood, took the letter back, read it again to be sure. "This is recognition, Victor. Real recognition of what we've accomplished." "What you've accomplished? I just stopped sabotaging myself long enough for you to fix everything." "We fixed it together." She looked at him seriously. "Are you interested? It would mean time in Cambridge occasionally, speaking to students, actually admitting we don't have all the answers." "I never have all the answers. That was half the problem." He shifted Catherine to his other hip. "But yes, I'm interested, if you are." "I am." The possibilities were already forming. We could develop a real curriculum, best practices for estate management, financial planning, even, she hesitated, even sections on partnership, how to actually work with your spouse instead of against them. Victor's mouth twitched. That's either brilliant or insane. Usually the same thing. They accepted the invitation. Spent the next months developing materials, planning lectures, actually talking through everything they'd learned. It was harder than expected, forcing them to confront their mistakes openly, to admit what they'd done wrong and how they'd fixed it. But it was also freeing. Their story, the messy, imperfect reality of it, could actually help people, could prevent others from making the same errors. The first lecture was terrifying. Evelyn stood in front of 200 students and felt like she might vomit. Victor squeezed her hand once before stepping up to the podium beside her. "Good morning," he said. "I'm the Duke of Ravensmoor, and this is my wife, the Duchess. We're here to talk about estate management, but more importantly, we're here to talk about failure." That got their attention. "5 years ago, I was drowning," Victor continued, "buried in debt, sabotaged by enemies I didn't know I had, married to a woman I didn't trust and didn't deserve. I was doing everything alone and doing it badly." Evelyn picked up the narrative. "And I was trapped in a marriage I didn't choose with a man who treated me like furniture. I had no power, no voice, no future except the one he'd decided for me." "We should have failed," Victor said. "By all logic, our marriage should have collapsed. The estate should have been lost. We should have destroyed each other." "But we didn't," Evelyn finished. "Want to know why?" The students were riveted. Over the next hour, they laid it out. The mistakes, the corrections, the moment they'd stopped fighting each other and started fighting together. The practical strategies, financial planning, communication, trust, but also the personal ones, learning to ask for help, admitting weakness, choosing partnership over pride. Marriage and estate management aren't that different, Victor concluded. Both require transparency. Both fail when one person hoards control. Both thrive when you actually communicate instead of assuming. And both are terrifying, Evelyn added, because you're risking everything on another person, on yourself, on the possibility that you might actually succeed. But the alternative, staying isolated, controlling, afraid, that's not strength, Victor said. That's just slow failure. The students erupted in questions. They stayed an extra hour answering them, and even then had to cut it short because Catherine was with a nursemaid and had limits to her patience. Walking out, Evelyn felt exhausted but exhilarated. "That went well," Victor said. "It did. You were good up there." "We were good. Together." He took her hand. Like everything else. The years that followed weren't perfect. They had bad seasons and good ones, financial struggles and successes. More children, a son named James who was quieter than Catherine, then another daughter, Eleanor, who was loudest of all. Ravensmore thrived. The estate became profitable. The programs they developed at Cambridge became influential. Their story, the cold Duke and his calculating Duchess, who'd accidentally fallen in love, became legend. But Evelyn and Victor knew the truth. There was nothing accidental about it. They'd chosen each other, kept choosing each other. Through fights and fears and failures, through joy and success and growth. They'd built something real from nothing, something worth fighting for. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the estate was peaceful, and they sat together in the library where everything had changed, they'd remember. The cold fortress that had become a home, the calculated marriage that had become partnership, the strangers who'd become family. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked one such evening, years into their marriage. "Taking a chance on me? On us?" Victor looked at her, this woman who'd saved him from himself, who'd built an empire from ruins, who'd given him everything he'd never known to ask for. "Never," he said. "Not once. Not ever." And he meant it. They'd started with nothing but necessity. A transaction. A bargain. A marriage that was supposed to be cold and calculated and empty. Instead, they'd built fire. Built passion. Built love that was messy and difficult and absolutely real. They'd won. Not because it was easy. Not because they were perfect. But because they'd refused to give up. Refused to settle for less than everything. And in the end, that made all the difference.